Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Gran Touring Series Racing League Season 35, Round 3, here at Circuit de la Sarthe. I'm your host, Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depends on what media you follow me on, and we're back this Tuesday for another frantic round of action at the legendary Le Mans 24-hour circuit. And tonight, we'll be taking a look at the EU Division 2 guys and seeing how they size up amongst one another in the season finale. Now, of course, the story last time out in terms of the EU Division 2 guys is that we saw a huge amount of confrontation between our drivers, fortunately out on circuit, not down in the paddock, I should point out, but out on circuit at St. Croix. And, well, there was a good mix-up in terms of the results, and a number of our drivers really started to shine through, and it's mixed up the order considerably as we're heading into this finale. Now, I'm just hearing in my ear from the stewards at the moment that everybody is starting to get sized up for tonight, and we're seeing the rest of our drivers turn up in the paddock. We've still got a couple more drivers to come, so just a little bit of patience, but of course that's why we have a further 14 minutes before we get our start checks underway. But the good news is we're expecting a good turnout for tonight, and it should be a nice healthy turnout, whereby we'll be seeing the majority of our drivers running around on the circuit. But I hope you're all doing well and that you've had a good Tuesday and the first half of your week is going well so far. Alrighty then, so without further ado, let's start going through our order and start calling out our drivers one by one and having a look at who's hot and who is not at the moment but maybe by the end of today. So, our current leader in the standings, who is the host of tonight's lobby as well, and is therefore our hosting steward, if you will, is one Pies. Now, Pies, as we try and find him out on circuit, if he's running out on circuit at the moment, or actually I think he's just sort of sitting in the lobby, he's not actually out on the circuit as is. Pies is currently leading on 96 points in the standings. Had a very good follow-up to round one, with round two seeing him score the exact same score of a total of 48 points. So 48 plus 48 getting that 96. And round two consists of him picking up a second place to begin with and then two first places back to back. And falling into sequence, that's exactly what happened in his round number one as well, as Pies is now out on circuit and he has switched to the Mazda 787B. So we've seen a car change from Pies, hoping to probably deploy the power of the Mazda 787 down the straight compared to the Porsche, which was stronger through the corners. So we wish Pies well, of course, tonight, and he is really in the driving seat, if you'll excuse the pun, for being our championship winner come the end of tonight's racing, as it's a further 12.5 points down before we get to our next driver in terms of the standings, and that is one FBev from Ireland, who's currently not out on circuit but will be joining us in the near future. But he's currently sitting on 83.5 points. And then you've got to go a little bit further back to 68.5 points for this man from Germany, running out in the 962C for the final time of this year, and that is Robert Demicaro from Germany. Robert has had a mixed fare of fortunes. Round two was okay to Robert, albeit I think he felt, or particularly when I had the chance to interview him before he went out on circuit today, he felt that he's been marred a little bit by mistakes which have just held him back from potentially sealing some fantastic results. Well, in round number one, of course, he had that absolutely horrific race number one where he came pretty much dead last. But then he started to find his form in round number one, what with better results in races 2 and 3, and that trend did not repeat itself in round number 2. And in fact, Robert seemed to find a good amount of form, picking up 2 third places back to back, and then a 4th place in the finale of round 2. But I think he's really trying to push to make sure he's always on that podium, and he's looking for that all-important race win, because I think Robert feels that it's been mistakes and inconsistent moments, just those little things have built up over the course of each race, in each round, and it's holding him back. But of course, he's got a long way to go to overhaul our second place man, who's now out on circuit. He's just arrived and got straight out onto the track, and that is FBev, who is in the Porsche 962C as well, so staying with the same machine as before. And as we said earlier, he's sitting on 83.5 points. Had a bit of an interesting round number 2. Last week he found himself coming 6th in race number 1, 2nd in race number 2 and 3rd in race number 3. So he had a bit of a difficult start, but then started to improve dramatically, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what he can get up to tonight. Now, fourth in the standings is one Marky Marks from the United Kingdom, also bringing out the 787V, switching away from the Porsche. It's good to see a couple more change-ups here. He's running a Christmas-themed livery as well, with a little Christmas tree on the front. It's almost as if somebody said, hey, what if we could get one of those terrible Christmas sweaters onto the Mazda 787V? But personally, I think it's worked out really nice. Now, coming away from Christmas themes and onto his current standing, Marky Marks in the Drivers' Championship is sitting on 64.5 points, so 4 down on Robert in third. But you can imagine that Marky Marks has got it all to do today to try and overhaul Robert and come third in the final standings. His round 2 was not as strong as his round 1, in the fact that he went from pretty much always being on the podium, minus a 5th place at the end of round number 1, to finding himself being down into the middle of the order come round number 2. And in fact, he picked up 7 points in both races 1 and 2, and then he picked up 10.5 points in race number 3 for taking the same finishing positions. So really, Marky Marks had a very consistent round 2, but it wasn't the positions he wanted, I suspect, by comparison with the competition he's up against. But still, you can imagine that Marky Marks will be one of those drivers looking to improve as much as possible tonight and boost his points. Now, ZenQ Meister has just turned up on circuit. He's just coming down in the paddock at the moment, so he'll be getting the car out there. He's currently sitting 5th in the standings from Poland. The Polish driver on 59 points, so only a further 5.5 down on Marky Marks. So we've got it quite heating up in the battle for P3 in the Drivers' Championship, where ZenQ last time out had a very mixed set of fortunes. In round 2, his race number 1 was a P5, brilliant result, looked great on paper. Then race number 2 was disastrous, seeing ZenQ drop all the way towards the back of the field, and then he pulled off an absolute blinder in the finale, picking up 19.5 points in the third race of the evening, which saw him essentially overturn what was perhaps destined to be a difficult evening, and has seen the Polishman all the way up in 5th place in the driver's standings. And you can imagine ZenQ will be doing everything he possibly can tonight to try and pit Marky Marks and Robert. Now, of course, he's not running on circuit at the moment, so we can't switch over to him. So instead, we'll switch over to one Dr. Otterface, who's currently sat in the pits with his Porsche 962. So bringing out the Porsche one more time. Dr. Otterface sitting on 53.5 points, so a little bit of a gap between himself and ZenQ as he pulls out onto the circuit here. The thing is for Dr. Otterface is that essentially, on those 53.5 points, he's joint P6 in the standings with Johnny Powell, as we try to look for his car. In fact, he's parked out the way and he's just parking at the end of the pit lane. And of course, fortunately for him, this is not going to be by the FIA standards of stewarding, unlike what happened to Lewis Hamilton at Sochi in Formula 1 this year, where he did some practice starts at the end of the pit lane, of course, and picked up a pair of penalties for 2 illegal starts. But Dr. Otterface here, coming back to our driver, sitting on those 53.5 points. His round number 2 was actually quite good, in the fact he started off with a 7th place and then saw it improve to 2 back-to-back 5th place finishes in races 2 and 3. And you can imagine that really he'll be looking to consolidate that 6th place in the championship and potentially push ZenQ and Marky Marks hard, trying to get up towards P4 in the standings perhaps. But we'll wait and see what turns out for the British driver. But we wish him well, of course, and he'll be looking to do everything he can. Now, our next driver we come to, as we just take a look onto our statistic sheets, is one Mr. Feel the Vibes, also known as Johnny Powell. Now, Feel the Vibes currently running around in his own Porsche 962, the rather pink and alluring 962 livery at that. The British driver joint P6 in the standings with Dr. Otterface, and whilst he had a terrible round 1, round 2 was where Feel the Vibes really started to come into a world of his own, in the fact that he picked up 2 4th place finishes in races 1 and 2, and it was only race 3 which saw him drop a little bit further down, picking up a P6, but still good points on the board, and that's enabled him to get into contention for that battle for P6 in the standings or even higher. You then have to go a little way down now in order to find our next driver in the standings. But before we do that, we're just going to introduce ZenQ Meister in the Porsche 962, running in that Christmas-themed livery with the anime character Paduro. And what you can imagine is ZenQ on those 59 points, as we mentioned, having had a reasonable round number 2, his best result being achieved in the final race of the 3 races of the evening. 19.5 points going to him for what was, if I remember correctly, a 2nd place finish. So ZenQ having his strongest result, he'll be looking to secure P5 as the minimum and then push upwards towards the top 3 in tonight's races. But then we've got to find Gomez, who is our next driver in terms of going through that sequence, so the driver who's 8th in the standings. Now, I'm not sure if Gomez has arrived as yet. I do not think Gomez is out on circuit at the moment or in our paddock, so we're going to wait. But the quick story on Gomez, 50.5 points, so only 3 down on Dr. Otterface and also Feel the Vibe. So Gomez is right in the hunt for that P6 in the standings. But he didn't have the best of rounds last time at St. Croix, in the fact that his best result in the end was a P6 in race number 2, matching his best result, if you will, in round number 1. But I think what Gomez will be looking to do tonight is try to get himself really into that top 5, because that's where the points are going to matter if he wants to jump both Feel the Vibes and Dr. Otterface. But it's going to be close between those guys. They've been back and forth all season. Now, outside of those gentlemen, who else have we got to talk about? Well, we have the Finnish driver, Peachy Erla. Now, Peachy is currently parked, or seems to have had a little bit of a mistake at the Porsche curves here, staying well out of everyone's way and taking to the escape road before rejoining, as is the road that machinery is normally relayed out into the circuit if they need to do repairs to a barriers or extricate a car. It's why the escape zone's there. But in the case of Peachy Erla, currently sitting with 49 points, had a very, very disappointing round in round number 2, and effectively what he saw in round number 2 was that all the hard work that had gone into round 1 just seemed to fall away from him. The fact that his best result in round 1 was a P5 when we're back in Italy at Autodrome Largo Maggiore GP, but then St. Croix was very punishing to the driver in the fact that his best result of the evening was a P7 in race number 2. Now, we know that the Finnish driver is strong when he hits his form, and he's always contesting towards that top 5. But will he find that form tonight? We'll have to find out in the near future. But of course, we've got our fingers crossed, because we could be looking at effectively here what is a 5-way fight for P5 in the championship standings, with Peachy Erla being 10 points down ZenQ right now, but it's all to play for over the course of the 3 races. In P10, we have Alpha Sick, who will not be racing still. Unfortunately, Alpha has retired fully from the season. We've had that confirmed. So Alpha 6 sitting on 38.5 points, will not be contesting any positions further up the field, but the question will be then, if we switch away from Alpha, if Stanley arrives in the paddock, we're expecting Stanley to arrive tonight. If Stanley turns up, currently sitting on 32.5 points in P11 in the driver's standings, will he be able to jump over Alpha 6 and get into that top 10 in the Drivers' Championship? And Stan had an absolute disaster of a round 2 in the fact that he seemed to be really fast. In fact, Stan was touted to be one of, if not the fastest driver on 1 lap pace and potential race pace around the circuit, but he just could not get it hooked up and mistakes kept creeping in. So we wish Stan all the best if he does participate tonight. We then have to go a little way further down to find another Dutchman in the form of Vincent Simmer, running in the Porsche 962 machine, where he is currently sitting on 32 points, so only half a point off of Stan in the battle for P11 in the championship. And Vincent, whilst he did not have the ability to attend round number 1, so he picked up no points as a result, he had a phenomenal round number 2, seeing him pick up a win in race number 1. And then whilst race number 2 was disastrous, in race number 3 he saw it improve somewhat in the end, picking up 12 points overall in the 50% points bonus race. And what you can imagine is, from Vincent's perspective, he will be looking to give it his all today, because he knows he cannot win the championship, despite the fact his round 2 form would suggest he had an opportunity to if he could have participated in round number 1. But he will be looking to get as many points as possible, potentially to get another 32 points or more in tonight's races, and that would see him jump up to 64 points, which would put him smack bang in contention for the top 5 in our drivers' standings, if of course the drivers above him do not improve significantly. But they have the opportunity to improve, and even minor improvements for them would take them away from the risk of being exposed to Vincent in the drivers' standings. We've got 2 more drivers to talk through. Colm MD currently sitting 13th in the championship with only 13 points, a matching number and a matching point score. Unfortunately, Colm was not able to take part in round number 2 and will not be taking part tonight either due to personal circumstances, but we wish Colm all the best so Colm cannot improve. And Explosive Fireball, the last of our drivers in the standings, who will be running under the driver's name of Explosive Fireballs. Is he around at the moment? We cannot see him out on circuit or down in the paddock, so we may not see Explosive Fireballs, who's currently sitting last in the Drivers' Championship with 10.5 points. Wasn't able to take part in round number 2 either, so it may be the case that both Explosive and Colm has secured their final positions, 14th and 13th respectively. But that's how it stands currently in the Drivers' Championship, and really the pressure will be on Pies for one, And the reason the pressure will be on him, because he does have a sizable advantage of 12.5 points, which you could argue is a one race advantage. But if he gets it all wrong, in race number 3 in particular, finds himself at the back, and that EV is able to get the win, well, those 21 points will go a huge way. But still, that's to be decided, and we've just had confirmation that Stan Lee, the Dutchman, is out on the circuit, running in the Mazda 787B, so Stan has gone for the switch to the faster machine down the straight, and Stan, as we introduced him earlier, had that disastrous round number 2, which saw him only pick up a total of 9 points, and that retirement in race 3 meant that he couldn't pick up any additional points in the bonus points round. And well, from Stan's perspective, now those 32.5 points, he's got to give it everything tonight and try it to avoid making even the minor of mistakes, which as soon as he avoids those mistakes, if he can find that consistent form, then expect Stan is going to be contesting top 5 positions, if not the podium, because we know he has a sensational amount of pace out of all of our drivers in EU Division 2. That's not to the detriment of our other EU Division 2 drivers, I should point out, ladies and gentlemen, but Stan is the wild card here in the fact that he has so much untapped pace, it's just whether he can lay it down on the circuit. And Gomez, just coming back to him, we did point out earlier that he'd arrived. Gomez running in the Porsche 962C, and remembering that he's currently 8th in the standings, he picked up a 1 second penalty for running wide out of Tetra Rouge. Now, many of you will be wondering at this point, okay, so we just introduced everyone and it's okay in the driver's standings, well, what about the team standings? Because those also matter. Well, in the team standings at the moment, as we just switch over on our spreadsheet screen, the current team are leading by a sizable advantage, albeit not an insurmountable one, is the combination of Pais and Gomez, who form Team 6. Currently sitting on 146.5 points. They find themselves 22.5 points ahead of Team 5, which consists of Zenq and Marky Marks. Those guys sitting on 123.5. Now that gap can be closed tonight easily. It only takes really 1 or 2 races for that gap to close up, should Zenq and Marky Marks outperform Pais and Gomez significantly. And then it comes down to race 3. But I think from Pais and Gomez's perspective, if they can hook up the opening 2 races and get good point scores, they don't have to finish that far in front of Zenq and Marky Marks. They will effectively put that win in the Constructors' Championship outside of their reach. And then you've got to go only a small way down to find 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship, and that consists of the combination of Evbev, our Irishman, and also Stan Lee, where those guys, Team 7, are sitting on 116 points, and they will be looking to try and close that gap to Team 5 to pick up 2nd in the Constructors, where that gap is only, as it currently stands, 7.5 points, and that is literally a race. That can all change in a single race. So for them, who knows what could happen, and they'll be pushing hard tonight. You've then got a further 9 points to go before you find Team 3, who are 4th in the Constructors, consisting of Dr. Otterface and Feel the Vibes. Now, Otterface, of course, being the one at the moment who, as we can see on the practice timing, seems to have a bit of a pace advantage over his teammate. Well, that hasn't necessarily been reflected in their results. They've actually had a good trade-off in terms of results with one another, and they find themselves quite close in the championship standings, as we talked about earlier as well. So they will need to put aside their differences in order to work together to get into that top 3 in the Constructors. But of course, at the same time, they'll both want to prove that they were the better driver out of the pairing. So they'll both want to get great results. So hopefully, unlike what we saw last night, for example, as we get underway with Stuck Check number 1, unlike what we saw with Chronic Opal and also Spalgazan last night, these 2 guys should not impede one another. Where it was a bit of an instance where Spalgazan did get in the way of Chronic Opal, it could be argued, but of course I think those guys have cleared it all up, not to cause any drama, but working together as a team is important here down the Mulsanne Straight. As we get Start Check number 1 underway, you've only then got a further 6.5 points down to team number 4 in the form of what is Vincent Simmer and Robert DiMicchiaro. And those guys will be looking to close up on Team 3 in the standings and potentially even leapfrog their way into 3rd against Team 7 should Team 7 have a disastrous night. We've then got Team 1 sitting on 87.5 points, the combination of Peachiola and Alpha C. Of course, Peachiola is the one who has got to carry the points for the team now, what if Alpha not participating. So I do not think that they're going to make a huge gain tonight in terms of the Constructors, but Peach will be looking to do his best to try and keep the team closer and closer to the top 5 in the Constructors. And in Team 2, the combination of Explosive Fireball and Coleman D, we know that both drivers are not participating. They're well off the points at the moment with 23.5, and they will not be improving tonight. So we know that last place in the Constructors has been decided, but of course, how's it going to turn out for all of our other drivers? We will have to wait and find out, as Start Check number 1 has been successful and everybody was able to pull off the line. That introduces the picture, and now for everybody's asking, what can we expect then? Well, we saw last night in EU Division 1, it really came down to a much more strategic race, even in the 3-lap sprint races that are races 1 and 2, where there's no pit stop. Those 10-minute races saw a huge amount of action down the Mulsanne Straight, where simply drivers were battling non-stop, and that battling meant that with the weak slipstream distance of 2.25 seconds, you had entire packs of drivers, not say 1, 2 or 3 drivers, but up to say 6 or 7 drivers, them all staying within the slipstream zone of one another and all chasing one another down for a potential podium, if not the race win. Now, of course, our EU Division 2 drivers will have watched that last night. They'll have watched back the tapes, and what they'll be thinking to themselves right now is, okay, I know I can't win the race immediately unless I pull a huge advantage going onto the Mulsanne Straight, and that huge advantage has to be, say, 3 seconds. On top of that, what they also know, based on last night, is that if anybody is running the Mazda 787B, and we have seen a number of drivers are doing that, such as Pies, such as also as we go down our order here, Marky Marks as well, the Mazda 787B with its gearing and straight line speed will be phenomenal, not just down the straights, but also at race start. We saw how Chronic Opel was able to pull off huge gains in the starting procedure, where the Mazda just had the better launch of the line, going up through first, second and third gear. And that's going to be important, because they need that knowledge, and they'll need to keep that knowledge in mind as we get underway with start check number 2. So what I suspect will most likely happen is our drivers might be a little bit more tactical in where they choose to start going for the side-by-sides into the chicanes on the Mulsanne Straight and into the Mulsanne Corner, and also into Indianapolis down the Gulf Straight. And I think we might see a little bit less action potentially on laps 1 and 2 in the sprint races, and it will open up in race number 3. And conversely, when we go into the endurance race of the 6th lapper, where you've got that mandated pit stop, what we saw happen there was there was no need to take tyres for the majority of our drivers. Those tyres costing an extra 4 seconds or so, and for those drivers, they found themselves then having to catch up and rely on the fighting of the guys ahead to pull them into contention. Well, they'll probably not be wanting to take a tyre change tonight. So start check 2 is about to get underway. Here we go, and it looks as though we do have everybody safely off the line once more, and people are being pushed about all over the place here. But of course, our drivers here will be just simply playing about at the moment. We normally have a third start check, and I think it's on the third one where you'll see drivers start to pay a little bit more attention and actually treat it as if it's a proper race start, because they'll want to get a feel for, okay, how does the starting procedure go, what's to watch out for, what do the cold medium tyres mean in terms of going up into the opening chicane. And again, we saw that we do get a bit of contact through the opening chicane, but the key thing is cutting the apex of turns 2 and 3. So the Dunlop chicane, particularly turn 3, where drivers were susceptible to a half-second penalty, and that half-second penalty cuts away a huge amount of time down the Mulsanne Straight, costing our drivers normally somewhere in the region of about 1.5 to 2 seconds and a huge amount of pace down the straight. So those are all the observations to take away, but really, as we're waiting now, we've still got 8 minutes to go before we're about to get underway with qualifying. I think all of our drivers here will be just trying to slow themselves down mentally and think, right, you've got a very limited number of laps in qualifying, just clock it in, get it ready to go. And our pole lap in EU Division 1 was that 3:18.4 set by Olaf Biscuit. And whilst we're perhaps not expecting any of our EU Division 2 guys to match that tonight, I'm expecting that probably pole is going to be in the region of a low 3:20, or perhaps even a 3:19, a high 3:19 if somebody really hooks up the lap. But we're just waiting out for things to get underway. And we're going to have one more start check, so this will be our final start check of the evening. And it's good to see some of you guys in chat, such as Dr. Otterface and Robert, but you guys are meant to be racing, so you better not stay in here for too long. But of course, wishing the guys who are racing tonight, all of them, the best of luck. And hello to Zeronic, who's popped into the chat as well. But anywho, start check number 3 is about to get underway. And again, to switch over to some of our drivers on board perspective. So if you're right in the mix right now, what can you expect in terms of having to go through that starting procedure? Well, you've got those red lights right at the end of the start-finish straight there. You can see them on the board, the gantry board. And then you've got to nail that launch. But of course, as you can see, going up through the gears, ZenQ having a really good launch there. And we're riding on board here with Gomez, for example. He's going to be on the inside for turn 1, which is a flat out corner, but then for turns 2 and 3, he's on the outside. He's got to be wary here of the fact that you get a huge concertina effect up into the opening chicane. And that is one of the things which caught some of our drivers out last time in race number 1, but they seem to neuter it down in races 2 and 3, is the fact that under braking, the guys who start right at the back of the pack in the race will have a lot more pace going up into the braking zone for the Dunlop chicane compared to the guys who started towards the front, and they need to brake earlier or lift before the braking zone in order to counteract that momentum they're carrying, because otherwise there's the potential where they can just simply go and rear end everyone as a result, which won't make our stewards too happy, and I'm sure the drivers who receive the rear ending won't be too happy either. Everybody's connectivity looked to be fine there, no major lag on anybody's end. And hello KLS1, and thank you for the compliment. I hope you're doing well. But we're just waiting then for 5 minutes to go, and then we'll be getting underway with qualifying. And really now it's time for you to start putting in your predictions for everyone watching in terms of who is going to be our winners for tonight and who could potentially see themselves drop a little bit down. Now, if I had to base it on what I've heard brewing down the paddock and from speaking to drivers, I think we could be seeing a change to the order here. Now, Pires has been the dominant driver in EU Division 2, and that's why he's got quite a gap up at the top. But it's not insurmountable, as we've previously mentioned. But I think we could be seeing a bit from the Irishman of EvBev tonight. I think that he's bringing a lot of pace to the table, and he's been putting in a good amount of practice. So who knows what he could get up to. Other drivers to be concerned about as well, it's the drivers who are going to be running. It will go for an all-in, should I say. And Gomez, I'm hearing, is pretty much taking that approach. It's all or nothing for Gomez tonight. The Portuguese driver will look to see if he can pull off at least a win, because Gomez has a lot of pace and he wants to untap it. Otto Face as well, don't rule him out. And good evening to yourself, Martin. And your predictions are P1 to Robert, P2 to Pires, and third to Marcy. Okay, well, we'll wait and find out. We also know that Robert in particular, coming to Robert, as I said earlier in his pre-interview, was saying about the fact he really felt as though he needed to do well tonight and make up for past mistakes. And I think Robert, if he can find that form, he is going to be a very difficult driver to beat. But there's so many guys here who literally, if they find their form, they could be right in that mix. ZenQ's the other example, where we know just how strong ZenQ is, so long as mistakes don't occur. It's all about nailing it in these Group C machines. Any one of the drivers here could, theoretically, come home the race winner. We're just waiting for the qualifying session. Now, we're only 2 a bit minutes away, and we're just going to double check with our race host to make sure that we're not missing any drivers. We don't have any phantom drivers out on circuit, as what happened in EU Division 1 yesterday. So for those wondering why there was a bit of an odd coming together between 2 of our drivers, I think it was KLS1 and one other driver, I can't remember who it was because on one of the driver's screens, the other driver didn't exist for them, and that meant that one collided into the other, but didn't know they collided into that driver. They just suddenly had a random accident. It's the equivalent of hitting an invisible wall out on the circuit. So that's why we do all these different start checks, and why I'm sending a message to our host to make sure I can see everyone, because I don't want to be in an instance whereby I'm commentating on what is currently 10 drivers, and we're just going to double check actually, make sure that we're not missing anyone. So it'll be 11 drivers. So I don't want to be commentating on 11 drivers plus the existence of myself in the lobby, when actually it will potentially be, say, 12 drivers. So I can tell you from experience, folks, when commentating on a race, when I started out commentating, there was a driver missing from that lobby who I could not see, but all the other drivers could see that, and that meant one driver actually had a major collision with this invisible driver. I thought they just got it wrong off circuit, and, well, there was this absolutely crazy moment, which we didn't realise was because somebody went for a move at the wrong time. But I think we've got everybody here today, and everybody is visible, so we'll be getting underway any moment soon. As we are counting down now, we have got less than a minute to go before qualifying. it's time, if you haven't already got yourself a cup of water or a cup of tea, alternatively a little bit of popcorn, or you need to have that quick hop to the bathroom, now's the time, because we'll be getting underway. And then after that, well, it's not going to stop. The festival is going to continue. Now again, just going through some of the things our drivers will watch out for. Track limits really caught a number of our drivers out, particularly in sectors 1 and 2. What the track limits on the second half of the Dunlop chicane, I cut in the curb. If you cut the curb, you can gain a huge amount of time, but if you cut it too much, you can pick up a half-second penalty. Tetra Rouge, our drivers will need to keep at least 2 wheels on the exit curb of Tetra Rouge. If they do not, then they're subject to at least a 1-second penalty. The chicanes, running down the Mulsanne Straight, if you go beyond the white lines, you can be subject to some rather finicky half to 1 second penalties, depending on how far you run wide and how the game evaluates how much time you've gained from them. And also cutting the apex curves at Bolster Mulsanne Corner and also Indianapolis can trigger half-second penalties, which our drivers will need to serve. We do have a huge number of penalty burning zones around here. Of course, we've got 3 down the Mulsanne Straight. We've got 1 just before the start-finish line. We've got 1 down the coming out of Arnage, and we've also got 1 down the Gulf Straight, if I remember correctly. We've had confirmation it will be 11 drivers. But yes, so as they're coming down, and really we're just hearing now as well that some of our drivers will be subject to grid place penalties for qualifying, and I believe, okay, we've got 1 more start check underway and then we're getting qualifying in. I believe Marky Marks is going to be subject to a 3-place grid penalty, so wherever Marky Marks qualifies, he will be back 3 positions. So we'll let you know about that one as it materialises. Otherwise, then it's the final start check, and then we're going to get underway straight away with our qualifying session. You can hear the whine of those Mazda 787 engines, those rotary engines kicking and screaming. In fact, we do get a closer view of the grid this time. Lights out and away they go for our drivers, and the final start check, everybody getting a clean start once again. And as we hop to the distant camera here, you can see that now all of our drivers are taking this start more seriously because they know it is the final race practice start they'll get. Although Pies there seems to have gone right off into the distance. I think Pies missed his braking point there by an astounding margin, and now everybody's coming out of the chicane, and there's a bit of contact here or there, but you could see that everybody clustered together a lot more going up into turn 1 and then turn 2's braking zone, and that shows you now they're starting to get that sight in mind and they're going to be good to go. Alrighty then, so qualifying is underway, ladies and gentlemen. 12 minutes, it is go, go, go. And the first driver who's going to be out on circuit immediately will be Pies, running away in terms of coming out the pits, but he's going to have Robert behind him here. And the question will be, what will our drivers do? Will they go for fuel burning, or will they try and get as many laps in as possible? Now, what we have to remember is an out lap here is about 3 minutes 30, if not a bit more. In fact, because we've already bitten into our qualifying session a small amount, you can imagine that out lap is going to be about 3 minutes 35 to 3 minutes 40, and then each qualifying lap is at least about 3.5 minutes, a bit below that, of course, because our qualifying times will be in the 3-minute 20s, we suspect. So from a driver's perspective right now, you don't really have much strategic choice available. You can't really go around on the circuit just burning fuel off. You could do a little bit of fuel burning, you could argue, if you wanted to invest in an all or nothing lap. But because you do have such a risk factor here in terms of when you're going around the lap, you could make a mistake and pick up a penalty, and that's going to compromise your lap. Do you really want to take that risk? As we see Pies there going wide out of the opening Mulsanne chicane, and you can see he had to get back under control rapidly before picking up a penalty. And hello to Spinola09 in the chat. Hope you're doing well. And to anyone who's tuned in since we started qualifying, hello to you, and I hope you're doing well as well. We've got that lovely whine of the Mazda 787B's rotary engine there as Pies comes down the straight. And I think a lot of our drivers here are going for a similar approach to what the majority of our drivers went for last night, in that they are just getting out on circuit and they'll either go one or two ways. At the end of this opening out lap, they'll either pit, put on a fresh set, then do another out lap and put in 2 qualifying laps. Alternatively, they will just go for a full 3 qualifying laps, not put on a new set of tyres, burn the fuel out of the car after each lap, because you do burn a sizable amount of fuel out just by simply running around the circuit. But we're not seeing any of our drivers here decide to slam on the anchors and hold the car in first or second gear and just rev it out as much as possible to burn off the fuel tank. Now, I suspect if qualifying was a bit longer, or a particular driver had nothing to lose in qualifying, we would potentially see a driver simply go around the circuit for 1 lap, at least spending about 75% a lap burning fuel. And that would put in your out lap in the region, if I remember correctly, of about 6 to 8 minutes in length if you went for a full fuel burning lap. But you can see Pies and Robert here constantly trading places in terms of sizing themselves up on the Gulf Straight. And I think here they're going to have to settle into an order in the near future, because we know that using slipstream as part of your qualifying lap is not permitted. If you end up coming up behind a driver who was slower than you and they've had a mistake, then it happens. It's just a matter of fact. But I think all of our drivers here are trying to compete to be right at the front in terms of the train, but also they want to try and get around as quickly as possible before they back off, just to give themselves a little bit more space, because of the fact they don't want to get compromised. You ideally around here, you'd want to give yourself about a 5 to 10 second window between the driver ahead of you and the driver behind you, so that way you don't feel any potential pressure if you should make a mistake on your lap, or the guy ahead of you is slower than you, or the guy behind you is faster than you. And that's what I'd recommend, and we saw that last night, and we can see that Pies now has settled into that position where we've got Robert, who's backed it out a bit, and Pies then is going to be our driver to take us around for the opening qualifying lap. So without further ado, Pies is going to take it away. He's had an absolutely terrible run out the final Ford chicane. That's going to cost him about 5 to 10 miles an hour of pace coming onto his opening qualifying lap. But I'm sure that Pies has got it all in mind, and he will try to find a way of building up that time. He's going to use the full width of the opening corner there. You can see we'll put 2 wheels to the left of the white line, which you are allowed to do. Those wheels are pulled into some dirty track. But in returning, he's had a good run, carried a lot of momentum through the Dunlop chicane, using first gear to essentially build up the acceleration of the car, something we didn't see from our Porsche drivers yesterday, everybody running the Porsche -2 yesterday. But we can see that Pies missing the apex there of the opening part of the sequence into Tetra Rouge, and he's missed the apex as well, the second part, and it's not a very good Tetra Rouge from Pies. In fact, he didn't really use the left hand side of the circuit as a way of turning in, and it means that I think this lap will be compromised to a small extent. But of course, as he's now coming down here, watch how that top speed's going to build, and we're going to expect him to hit about 210 before the braking zone. That is the Mazda strength, is that it's got that greater top speed, 208, 209, 210. Can he go even beyond that? It's going to be a top speed through the speed trap here of 214 miles an hour before braking. And this is a better run from Pies now. He seems to be settling down a little bit. His first sector was very scrappy, but his second sector has been stronger. He's still got multiple sectors to go, and he's just gradually creeping the car over to the right on the second part of the Mulsanne straight here. And of course, his target at this point will be just to nail the braking into his second chicane and get the best possible launch as he comes into the Mulsanne corner. Now, coming down here, we're braking from about 209, using the board on the right hand side as a reference marker, that 100 board, and now snapping the car in, a little bit wide of apex, but gets it under control. That's going to cost him about a tenth or two, because he wasn't able to get on the power as quickly as he would have liked, and you could see that in the action of his car, in the fact he tried to get the nose to turn rather aggressively, but it just wanted to understeer. And he has got a driver, we should point out, coming up behind him quite fast, and that is Phil the Vibes, who's actually having to stay to the right initially before breaking into the Mulsanne corner. And I think Vibes is quite conscious here that he doesn't want to pick up a toe, and we actually can see that Pies has missed the apex there of the Mulsanne corner. He was able to keep it on track, but he missed the turning point, and again, that's cost him time. And behind, if we switch to the onboard with Vibes, you can see he's having to stay off the racing line here, because he's worried about the fact he doesn't want to pick up that long distance toe off of Pies, and he's getting closer and closer, Vibes, and now as they both gone to the line, you can see he's having to try and jump off of it until he has to take the racing line. And this is a very difficult situation for Vibes, because he must be thinking to himself right now, and Pies has aborted the lap immediately because he knows that Vibes is coming up so quickly. That's great sportsmanship from Pies there to get out of the way, being conscious of another driver, and I think Pies has aborted this one and will rejoin and plan as he picks up a 1 second penalty for running off at Indianapolis. But I think Pies is going to essentially use this as a way of giving himself some space. He'll use the knowledge of where he went wrong in his opening qualifying lap and instead he will come back stronger on his second qualifying lap. But right now, Feel the Vibes is your lead driver out on circuit, so we switch to his onboard as he comes through the Porsche curves then, now coming up into the Chevrolet curves, and what you can see is nailing it pretty well here, just finding himself understeering a little bit through the start of the Corvette curves. Now this is the all-important left-hander, can he nail it? Very close to track limits there. I think that was just in from the onboard. We're going to find out very shortly. Did he pick up a penalty for track limits? No, he just kept it in there. That was a perfect run through the left-hander. Now the final two forward chicanes, and he'll be coming through here looking to literally straight line across. And his opening lap time then, and our opening lap out on circuit will be a 3 minute 23.1. How will Robert respond? Robert's lap is looking not quite in the same vector zone as this. It's a 3:23.6, so 4.5 tenths down. Highs into the pits for a fresh set of tyres, so he's immediately boxed, deciding to get off the dead rubber and going for a fresher set because he feels he can probably make the most of it. And Marky Mark's coming across there with a 3:31.8, which is quite a way down, as Ev Bev is coming across now with a 3:26.8, so putting in provisional P3. And then we've got Vincent Zimmer coming through now with a 3:26.2, and behind him Gomez immediately jumping up into that provisional P3 with 3:24.9. We've still got more drives to come around though, starting with Dr. Otterface in the opening qualifying lap, and this is going to be a very slow lap from Dr. Otterface, a 3:41.6. I suspect that was more of a pacing lap, and ZenQ the same, a lap that's almost 4 minutes long, and I think those guys were perhaps held up in the sequence of trying to get into the space out on circuit to avoid bumping into another driver. Stanley set a 3:31.5 there, but I suspect we're going to see a lot more from Stan. And Peach Yerla is now the final driver to come through after one lap, and Peach is going to set a time of what looks to be a 3:27.9. So after one round of qualifying laps, then the only drivers who haven't really set a reference time you could argue at the moment would be, well, I'd like to say Marky Marks, but then again, he's in the same region as Stan Lee, so it may be that perhaps they got tripped over by other drivers or tripped themselves over. But it's Dr. Otterface and ZenQ Meister and Pies are our three drivers at the moment who have not set a representative time due to reasons of their own. Whether it be ZenQ and Dr. Otterface seemingly wanting to find space out on circuit, or Pies having a bit of a calamitous opening qualifying lap. But our fastest man on circuit after one lap is Feel the Vibes, sitting on that 3:23.1. And Vibes will be probably thinking to himself right now, having burned 25% fuel out the car, as he's 2 tenths down almost on his opening lap, is he needs to find places to improve. Now, the question from Vibes' perspective is, do you go full attack on this lap, knowing that you're 2 tenths down, or do you back it off, burn a bit of fuel, and know you've got one more lap at your disposal? If I was in Vibes' case, if I didn't improve after Indianapolis before I come into Arnage, then I would look to, as soon as I come out of Arnage, I would back the car off immediately, make sure I've got that space out on circuit, but then burn some fuel and then go for one final lap. And you can see he has improved for Indianapolis, so I think Vibes is going to commit to this one as another qualifying lap, as he gets it all wrong coming out of Arnage, and you could see there that the rear end of the car just was not stabilised before he got on the power, and that's why he ended up oversteering, that snap oversteer kicking in. And we'll wait and see what Vibes is able to achieve. Robert, meanwhile, also charging around. Now, Robert is only 4.5 tenths down on Feel the Vibes, and 4.5 tenths, I say only, because 4.5 tenths isn't a huge margin when you consider the length of the lap here. You can make that up in a single sector. If you absolutely nail the sector, or in 2 sectors, you'll close that up rapidly. But in Robert's case right now, he's looking to improve off that 3:23, and he's the fastest man on circuit right now, 8 tenths up on our representative provisional pole lap, and Robert's only got one more set of corners to go. Then he needs to nail these. He doesn't quite use the full width for the final part of the Chevrolet curves, but as he comes now to the forward chicanes, this is going to be critical. Now, I don't think Feel the Vibes is going to improve. We're just going to see whether he does improve as he comes across here. It's going to be close, and he doesn't improve. Now, will Robert have improved here? He's quite slow coming through the forward chicanes, it looks like, at least on camera it looks slow, but as he comes across the line then, he sets the standard now of a 3:22.9. That is a very strong lap, and I reckon Robert may think that he's got a bit more to throw in there, because he did lose 2 tenths in the final sector, so he's got more time out on circuit if he can find it as he goes to his final qualifying lap. Now the Portuguese of Gomez here coming through and going into the forward chicanes. He has got Ev ahead of him, who's moved up to P4 ahead of Vincent Zimmer. And as Gomez comes across the line then, is this going to be an improvement? It is, and it moves him back up into P3 with a 3:24.3. So Ev will be thinking to himself right now, he's in direct competition. And hold on a second, what's happening here from Ev? He's parked up, and that means the Irishman will not be getting another qualifying lap. So he's just parked out half circuit and has decided to end his qualifying session. And we can see that one driver has jumped up into the mix, is ZenQ. He's moved up into P6 with a 3:26.9, so that's an improvement there. Peachy being one of the last guys to complete a second qualifying lap, and he'll just about come across the line if he doesn't make any mistakes through the chicanes to go on to one final qualifying lap. Will he improve here? He's coming through then. It's a 3:23 at the moment to beat, but I don't think it's going to be close enough, and it'll be an improvement. He's improved by 0.6 to a 3:27.3. Good job by the Finn. And as they come around then, we can see that Stanley has come across and not set an improvement so far. And just looking back for our order then, the standing at the moment is it is going to be Robert to beat, and Robert has parked up immediately. He has called time on his qualifying session, as has Peachy, so those guys have set their target times. Now, will anybody be able to beat them? We do also see that a car is parked up at Indianapolis here of Vincent Simmer, so he's decided to just park it up with his representative lap at the moment being what appears to be a 3:26.1. So Vincent in that P5 will just be parked up. But we can see that Feel the Vibes at the moment will want to take a shot back at getting at that pole lap. And good evening to those of you who've just joined, particularly Olaf Biscuit, who we can see in the chat, and also FBev, who's parked up and jumped in here instead. And well, with Feel the Vibes then, coming down into Indianapolis. Will he be up though as he comes up towards Arnage? We'll wait and find out whether he's improving or whether he's being the fastest man out on circuit. He is 6 tenths up on his current lap, and that would put him, I believe, on the fastest lap out on circuit at the moment. So we're going to wait and find out. And good evening to Jerry, race car driver as well. But all of our drivers parked up means they will not be going again. And it's a sizable number of drivers parking up after just 2 qualifying laps here. I think they probably feel within themselves. And Dr. Otterface as well parking up for 3:28.2. Marky Marks for 3:30.3. Stanley parking up for 3:31.5. So a lot of drivers not choosing to do one more lap. And I think that's simply because they don't feel as though they've got anything more in the tank. Now, Gomez is behind Pies here, and Pies has not yet set a lap in qualifying. So Pies will be wondering, I think Gomez here will be in 2 minds whether he tries to get past Pies. And we'll come back to what's happening between those guys. Feel the Vibes then, coming around into the Ford chicanes. Can he nail it and dethrone Robert from that pole position and push Robert to P2? He's coming for it and he's got it wrong. Feel the Vibes has got it wrong. That will not be an improvement. That is a disaster. Now, what's happening further back, as we can see that Pies has lifted off of it, or at least been overtaken by Gomez coming up into the run into the Porsche curves here. And you can see that Gomez is currently a 10th up on his personal best, but Pies, even if he's lifted here, he's got a good chance of making some headway up the grid order. And Pies has gone very wide due to the understeer invoked by the dirty air of the car in front of him. And I think Pies will be subject to a penalty on his car. It's a half-second penalty. He's going to burn it going into the Ford chicanes here. But Pies must be absolutely aggravated right now because he hasn't set an indicative lap. And as he comes around then to complete his lap, what will this be from Pies as Gomez does not improve in the end? And Pies comes across with a 3:28.6, which puts him P9. Now, did Gomez improve on that final lap? No, he did not. He dropped 2 tenths in the final 2 sectors. Have we got anybody else out on circuit? We do have a driver right now coming through the final course. It is ZenQ, who is not going to improve. Well, I say that, I bite my words, ladies and gentlemen. He does improve despite a penalty to a 3:25.1, putting him P4. So if he had had that penalty, ZenQ could have potentially been either third or perhaps even second. That must be absolutely aggravating for ZenQ, but he'll know that he's got a lot of pace available to him. Now, is anybody else on a lap right now? It doesn't look like it. So that is your qualifying order, ladies and gentlemen. Robert takes pole of a 3:22.9, only by 1.5 tenths over Feel the Vibes. The Brit will be joining the German on the front row. In P3, it will be the Portuguese of Gomez. Alongside him will be ZenQ Meister. Row 3 will be start off with the Irishman of FBev, joined alongside by the Dutchman of Vincent Simmer. Then the 4th row will be the Finn of Peachiola, joined alongside by the Brit of Dr. Otterface. Row number 5 will start off with Marky Marks, who has a 3-place penalty, so he'll be starting at the back. So actually, your 5th row will be started by Stanley from the Netherlands, joined alongside by Pies, and then at the back of the field will be Marky Marks. But well done to Robert for setting the pole position out of that 3:22.9. But that is our qualifying session over, folks. And well, a little bit of a surprise there perhaps in terms of the fact that ZenQ coming through with an absolutely sensational qualifying lap, and ZenQ has already stated to his team that that would have been at least P3 without the penalty. So I get the feeling that ZenQ will know here that he has got a lot of potential, because what you can see, he's only 2 seconds down off of Robert, and with him having to burn a 1.5 second penalty before the finish line, that puts him firmly in contention for being on the pace of Feel the Vibes and Robert here. So ZenQ is going to be a speed demon to watch out for as we go into race number 1. And thank you, Olaf, for suggesting a drinking game. So we've got a drinking game that's been suggested, ladies and gentlemen, which is that every time I say all sorts of wrong in the wall or oh no, Robert, take a drink. Alternatively, take a shot every time Dr. Otterface goes for a spin. Although we don't want Otterface, of course, to make any spins. We want to see him do well. Oh, goodness me. But anyway, so that's qualifying, and now we're just waiting for all the times to be accredited. Again, just for looking through the order for our race organisers, because I know they're currently setting all the positions, but it is Marky Marks who's going to be running us from the back of the field. But again, if Marky can get a good start here, you have to imagine that he could find himself making his way up the field quite rapidly. But really now, we are due to get underway with race number 1 within the next couple of minutes. And it did look as though a number of our drivers who were potentially fast, such as Marky Marks, just did not have a good lap as a whole. Marky Marks in particular reporting that none of his laps were ones where he didn't bin it at some point. So again, keep an eye on the Britishman. He'll be right at the back, but could he be jumping up into that top 5 by the end of race 1 and then find himself making a contest for the podium or even the race win? But now everybody's going to be getting set. We have got Otterface making his way out onto circuit, which I'm very grateful for to avoid any camera glitches. And I think Otterface is going to be doing a practice start or 2 in the run up towards turn 1. This is of course important for some of our drivers who want to get that little bit more practice in just before they get underway. And you can see here he's going to do his practice start with a traction control set to 1 most likely, and we're going to get race number 1 straight away, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to be underway. The countdown is here. Let's go and see what happens. Alrighty then, so on the right of your picture is our pole sitter of Robert. On the left of your picture is Feel the Vibes. Behind them, Gomez and ZenQ. But watch out for Marky Marks all the way down in what is P10 after all the standings are conducted. And Pyres in P9. And it's lights out and away they go, and it looks as though all of our drivers have had a relatively good start, front and rear of the field. Gomez going for the push there immediately, trying to go around the outside into turn number 1, but not making it count initially. Robert fending him off, and I think Robert here has defended well, but Gomez going for the launch into turn 2, into the chicane, and I think Gomez has got it there, and Robert had to take a huge amount of evasive action in order to accommodate Gomez going for that lunge, but it's worked out for Gomez, and as they all come up towards the next set of corners before Tetra, you can see Gomez is out in front, but meanwhile further down the field as they all come charging through, Peachy getting it all sorts of wide coming out of turn 5 there, and now going into Tetra Ridge. Does anybody get it wide and pick up a penalty? That of course will be the question as the Mulsanne straight now commences, and Gomez is leading and Robert immediately tucking into that slipstream, and you can see as they all charge down now after the initial kink, we've got Feel the Vibes up into P3, Vincent in 4th, and then further back ZenQ in 5th. All of our drivers forming into that line, that slipstream line that they will want to stay in, and they're all within order, and Feel the Vibes as they all go 4 wide under braking into the first chicane. Feel the Vibes is now up into the lead with Gomez 2nd, Robert 3rd, Vincent 4th. ZenQ jumps up into, ZenQ was almost up into 5th, but Vincent is holding on, and Ev is behind, and it is a slipstream train, ladies and gentlemen, as we can see at the rear of your picture. Stan Lee getting it all sorts of wrong, going down to the back of the field, but coming back towards the front of the field. well, you can see that Feel the Vibes and Gomez in this contest as they go into the break-in zone for the second chicane, and Vibes going defensive here, and there's contact. There is contact between Robert and Gomez, and that has sent Feel the Vibes out. And I think Robert here, as he tries to squeeze his way, and Robert has jumped up in front, but I'm wondering whether some of the drivers behind might be a little bit aggrieved. But of course, there's plenty of racing to go. This is only the opening lap of the 3, and we can see they're going to go, how many wide? Is that 6 wide potentially coming down to the Mulsanne corner? It's literally everybody scrapping for positions already, and hold on a second, Edmund goes into the back of both Gomez and also Robert, and that means they've all been sent off, and Zenku immediately pulling over. He feels responsible for that, but what it means is Feel the Vibes is now up into the lead, and behind him Vincent Simmer is now contesting and going for the move up on the Gulf Straight. Through the first kink they go, side by side then, and Vincent is drag racing the 2 Porsche drivers here, and Vincent is up into the lead. This is a new race leader for the first time in EU Division 2. Vincent is out front right now and battling away with Feel the Vibes. Otterface up into 3rd, Peachy up into 5th, and Marky Marks, of all the drivers, going a bit wide out of Indianapolis, but you can see that already Marky Marks is up into 4th, having started right at the back, and Zenku now back up into 6th, but there is quite a gap, and Stanley finds himself in 7th of all places, as we can see that Pies is creeping into the fray in P9, and right at the back right now, fighting over the last possible positions right now are Gomez and Evbev, trying to come up against Pies, but up front, Vincent Simmer is still holding on, fending off Feel the Vibes, and whilst we've got a moment, we are going to take a look at what happened in that collision. So, coming down to the break-in, we're going to ride on board with Zenku here, and what you're going to see, it all starts to concertina together. There was contact between, I think, Otterface and Zenku, and then there was some drivers up in front who also had that contact, and that's why everybody seemed to pinball into one another with the concertina effect on the break-in, and it was just a bit of a disaster. But as we come to the end of lap 1, and we can see that Feel the Vibes has got ahead of Vincent Simmer, that's most likely coming out of the Porsche curves. It will be Feel the Vibes leading the field ahead of Vincent Simmer, followed by Dr. Otterface, who's burnt a penalty, and we have Picciola charging down along his neck, and then we've got Marky Marks, Zenku in 6th, Robert in 7th, Stanley in 8th, and Stanley has had to burn a penalty and go off the race in 9th, then Pies in 9th, Gomez in 10th, and then Evbev back in 11th. And well, for Evbev right now, I think he finds himself just needing to do a little bit of damage limitation, probably trying to calm himself down after what was a bit of a disastrous Mulsanne corner, and he'll want to get back in the fight. But Otterface up into P3, and it's spacing out quite a bit between our top 4. Meanwhile, hold on a second, I say that, and then immediately Picciola is into the wall, and Robert gets caught up behind him through no fault of his own, and Robert drops all the way down, and Peachy gets knocked even further wide as they go through Tetra Rouge here, and it's a disaster for both the Finn and the German. Both of the drivers having it an absolute nightmare of a sequence of corners as they go into Sector 2. But let's find out what happened to Peachy, because that was uncharacteristic. So we jump on board then, and as you can see, coming down into the corner, under braking, he gets it just all sorts of wrong, goes wide, and the car gets catapulted off the circuit. So Peachy picking up an error there of his own, but as they all come through the first of the chicanes, and you can see that Gomez battling with Peachy, and Peachy really seems to be struggling right now in terms of falling back. And the one driver who's just had no luck throughout the entirety of this race, and you could argue for the whole season, has been Robert. He's just fallen all the way back to the rear of the field. But of course, he does have a lot of drivers ahead of him battling, and he will want to get back into that fight, as he could potentially be on for P4 if he plays his cards right. Well, Zenku getting past Pies into braking for the second Mulsanne chicane, and meanwhile, Marky Marks fending off the chase from Gomez, and Gomez has run wide and picked up a penalty, and behind him we can see that Evbev has picked up a 1-second penalty as well, and that means that Stan Lee is going to be breaking away from Evbev, and Robert can get past the pair once they take their penalties. But up front, meanwhile, Feel the Vibes 1.3 seconds ahead of Vincent Simmer. And I think Vincent right now will be very chuffed with his position. But in the rear of your picture, as somebody goes very wide, that's Peachy going wide out of the Mulsanne corner. You can see that Pies and Zenku had a drag race, and Zenku just holding on for now. But the Polish driver must know that Mazda has got huge legs on the straights, and it will be his advantage taken away from him as Pies is drag racing with him, and now under braking. Will Zenku try to hang it around the outside, or will he tuck it in behind and then go for the move back into Indianapolis under braking? I think if I was in Zenku's shoes here, I'd just focus on keeping it clean battling right now and finding the place to overtake on lap number 3, because you do not want to get pulled back into the massive train of cars that are all chasing after P4 at this point, because what we effectively have here, folks, is 7 drivers competing for P4 in a long train, and you can see one driver has got it wrong, and that was Gomez coming out of Arnage, and Robert now finds himself in the hunt for P8, chasing after both Gomez and Stanley, and he's getting closer and closer, the German, to the Portuguese, and I think it's going to be only a matter of time before he tries to go for that move. And as they cut into the Porsche curves then for the second time of asking, Robert backs out of it initially because he knows who had that dirty air. You can see Gomez went wide. In fact, hold on a second, who's got incredibly wide and got it all sorts of wrong there? Because we've just seen somebody drop all the way down. Was that Stanley, who's just had an accident? So coming up into the corners then, riding on board with Stanley, he's just carried too much momentum and the car's understeered away from him, and that has seen him go off circuit. So that explains what's happened to the Dutchman. And Stanley, again, another driver who just cannot find Eli. And as they come onto the final lap then, note that the gap between Vincent and Phil the Vibes has closed down by 2 tenths. And I think we could be expecting a battle between the two for the race win, albeit it'll be down the straight. As we can see in the rear of your camera shot there, we do have one of our drivers pulling off the racing line, and I believe that was Gomez pulling off the racing line to burn a penalty there, and that has unleashed both Marky Marks and Robert up into P6 and P7, and Robert now on the recovery drive of his life, trying to get himself back up into that top 5 and place himself well for race number 2. Further up front, however, it's Vincent who is closing up on Phil the Vibes, and Vibes has gone off, and that means he's going to have both a penalty coming out of Tetra Rouge if the slowdown that he conducted wasn't enough there, and in fact he has been given a half-second penalty, and that means Vincent right now can run away because he's going to have such a straight line speed advantage into the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. But forgetting about that for the time being, we're not worried too much about that. It's a three-way fight for P3, and Zenq is leading this as Pies has had to burn a penalty at Tetra Rouge, and that means Otterface right now is in contention for a podium, albeit he's going to have to close down Zenq, and we know that Zenq is an absolutely frantic defender when it comes to holding on to positions on the last lap, and Zenq will do it right. And hold on, so I see Picciolo's just got it wrong under braking, and he's missed his braking point and gone into the wall at the Mulsanne chicane, the first one. And that means Peachy is now going to drop all the way down the order. But in terms of changing the position then, we can see that Pies is feeling pressure from the German of Robert, and Robert is going to go for the move here into the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. There's quite a gap between these two, and then Otterface up in front, and we can see that, hold on a second, someone's got it horribly wrong. That's Phil the Vibes, who's gone all sorts of wrong coming out of the second of the Mulsanne chicanes here. Zenq has fended off what is Otterface for that battle for P3, but as we jump back a little bit then, let's just see what happened between Robert and Pies. So was it just a simple move under braking, or did Pies decide to let it go here, knowing that he would be in a position to attack later on? And I think, yeah, Pies has just backed out of it after letting Robert go for that inside line, and he's backed off as a result as they cover the Mulsanne corner, and Robert's gone deep and wide out of the Mulsanne corner, and that drops him all the way down after all that recovery work. Just one mistake from Robert. That's a disaster. And whilst Vibes made a mistake, that means Vincent is now 3.7 seconds ahead in the lead. And I think Vincent just needs to bring it home as Zenq and Otterface are battling into Indianapolis. In the rear of your shot, you see Gomez and Pies battling as well. Pies not getting any relief in terms of battling as Otterface is holding on right now. But what about Gomez and Pies? Well, actually, I say that about Otterface. You can see that he made a mistake under braking into Indianapolis, and Zenq finds himself ahead. And Gomez has got past Pies under braking and is now up into P5. And behind them, they've got the train of cars once again all nipping at the heels here and trying to get into that top 5. But it will be Gomez now in the commanding seat. Or should I say the driver's seat here, no pun intended, as he's going to try and bring it home in the top 5. And Gomez has got work to do, but it seems as though all the drivers are spacing out a little bit. And whilst Vincent is being closed up by Phil the Vibes very gradually, you can see Vincent is just holding on right now and just driving it smart as Zenq has broken away from Gomez. And we've just lost somebody, I think, ladies and gentlemen, because Gomez was P5 and now he finds himself P4, and he's got a lot of pressure. And Otterface has made a mistake somewhere because he's dropped away. But your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, a new race winner in EU Division 2 is Vincent Simmer in race number 1. Second place goes to Phil the Vice for an absolutely courageous run, despite the mistake on the final lap. Then Zenq brings it over in P3. Gomez just about holds on for P4, and in the drag race to line, it will be Pies, then FBev, then Marky Marks, followed by Robert in P8, who'll be kicking himself, and Otterface in P9, Peachy in P10. Now, we've got Stanley still coming around, but what happened to Otterface towards the end there? He just simply ran wide at the first Porsche curve. And that is, well, and then he had to back out of it because he literally rejoined on the worst possible place to rejoin. And our final driver coming across the line was Stan Lee, who is coming through the Ford chicanes right now, ladies and gentlemen. And as he comes out through the final Ford chicanes, give him a round of applause. He's had a bit of a disastrous race number 1, but he's still got plenty of work to do in races 2 and 3. It will be Stan Lee finishing off all of our runners with a 1-second penalty at boot. So those are the final standings, subject to any stewards' decisions, of course. But your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, Vincent Simmer. Well, if race number 1 is going to set the standard of what the next 2 races are going to be, I'll promise you 2 things, ladies and gentlemen. 1, it's going to be full of action. And 2, I'm going to have no voice left by the end of it. But anyway, enough about me. Coming back to our standings then, so after race 1, we could see that our fastest lap was set by Phil the Vibes, who came home in P2, but our race winner of Vincent Simmer. And just to double check, in terms of our statistics over the course of this season for EU Division 2, Vincent, I believe, has not yet had a win in this season. And actually, no, my apologies. He did have the win, so I have to correct myself. He had the win in round 2, race 1. So this is his second win, but his first win of tonight. So apologies for getting that mixed up. So picking up another win there. But congratulations to him for what was a fantastic job. And you've got to feel a little bit for Phil the Vibes, in that I think he felt that he would be bringing it home in P1, but it was just a mistake in the opening half of the final lap, which cost him all that time and meant that he dropped too far back from Vincent to be able to make a charge for the win towards the end. As I say, plenty more to come. And well, if we want to call out any standout performances beyond our top 2 here, I think a big shout out needs to go to Piers for finding his way all the way up into P5, despite having a very difficult start, finding himself going all the way down the field. And it was a bit of a swing and a roundabout for the British driver, but getting himself up into P5. And Gomez as well, we should point out, coming home in that P4, although I think there are going to be some questions down at the paddock and with the stewards with regards to that incident into the Mulsanne corner on lap number 2, because there was a huge amount of push and shove there, and I don't think it was intentional by anyone, but it meant a number of drivers found themselves making their braking points and then suddenly being knocked wide as if it was essentially looking at Sunday afternoon bowls. But then again, we're not here to talk about bowls, we're here to talk more about racing, and we're going to have race number 2 underway in the very near future for you, as soon as humanly possible. All our drivers just sat down in the pits right now. None of them wanting to go out on circuit and get any more laps in by the looks of things. Yeah, it was hard to predict, and you've got to feel for Robert. You really have to feel for Robert. Had a good start, albeit Gomez went for the move early into turn 2. Still kept it there though, Robert. He was still in there, and then it all just started to go wrong bit after bit. And then when he started to regain, it all went wrong for him once again at the Mulsanne corner, just running off. But I'm sure Robert will bounce back. He's still got 2 more races to go. We've had our change of time of day. It's now 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So these French time zones are very confusing. They change more frequently than the British time zone. Well, one thing that is worth noting is that a number of our drivers had moments into the heavy braking zones, such as into the first chicane along the Mulsanne Straight. So we're talking about Pichiola's instance, where they missed braking zones and then had to take to the escape road to take evasive action, not to clump into somebody else. Now, not to say our drivers are terrible or anything like that, but why I'm pointing that out is the fact that it's one of the things that seems to be catching our drivers out is how much speed they are picking up in the slipstream down the straight. Because you can imagine, then in qualifying, we saw our top speed trap speeds were in the region about 215 as race number 2 is about to get underway. They're probably hitting about 220 to 225 instead in the slipstream. But here we go then, ladies and gentlemen. Race number 2 coming right at you. So as the camera pans down to our grid, we can see on the right of your picture, to lead us away will be Vincent Simmer. On the left, Feel the Vibes. Behind them, Zenku, Meister and Gomez. But watch out, in 8th place, Robert. He'll be wanting to come through as quickly as possible. And in fact, everybody's been told to immediately back out of the start because of the penalties that need to be applied. So penalties were our race host forgot to apply some penalties at the start of race 1, so the rest of those are being carried over into race number 2. So that's why we are aborting the race start for race number 2, and we'll be restarting it very shortly. So there's going to be a little bit of a delay to the start, and I think we may have actually had an instance where a driver now finds himself stuck. No, fortunately we have got everybody out of the start procedure there for race number 2. So just give us 1 or 2 more minutes. Pies are just going to have to make some very quick tweaks to the grid order. But we'll be bringing race 2 as soon as we possibly can. But in the meantime, feel free to start placing your predictions. Personally, I think in this one, the driver to watch out for will be, well, the drivers to watch out for at the front will be Feel the Vibes and also Gomez. Both of those drivers seem to make very good ground at the start. Gomez in particular will be wanting to repeat his antics from race number 1 in terms of going for a move as soon as possible into the opening chicane. However, watch out for Robert, who'll be trying to come through from P8. We can imagine that Robert will have a lot of pace at his fingers as we're getting race 2 underway once again. So race number 2 for the second attempt, or second time of asking. Here we go then, guys. Well, guys and girls, and without further ado, let's get underway. So as we pan down to our starting order then, again, it will be on the front right of your screen. Vincent Simmer leading us away with Feel the Vibes alongside him on the left-hand side. Gomez and Pies behind them, but watch out for Robert, who's starting P7 with Marky Marks picking up a 3-place grid penalty, which has now finally been applied. It's lights out and away they go, and you can see Vincent has had a relatively good start. Feel the Vibes bogging down in the opening starting procedure, and that means that Feel the Vibes has not been able to make up too much ground, but he's holding on to that P3. Zenku already finding himself right in the mix of a battle coming up into the opening chicane as Vincent gets it very late on the brakes, and Pies goes wide there, going a bit too deep on the brakes, one would feel, and it's all chop and change right now. And Vincent did not get punished for making his mistake in the opening chicane, but Feel the Vibes did get punished for what appeared to be a bit of a mistake as Evbev finds himself up into P3, Zenku in P4, Vibes all the way down P5, Peachy and Robert both gaining a little bit through the sequence there, and Stanley up into P8 as they all come into Tetra Rouge then. All our drivers seemingly getting it together, and we can see Dr. Otterface already starting to prepare a move on Stanley as they all come through, but all of our drivers making it through safely this time, as we can see that Gomez actually picked up a half-second penalty at Tetra Rouge, which means he drops away all the way down to P4 currently, well, even further, he's going to lose out so many places here with that penalty, and Vibes and Robert are now up into 4th and 5th, and Zenku is released into P3, and we can see Peachy and Stanley both getting it wrong there, and also Marky Marks. A number of drivers being caught out on these cold medium tyres in the braking zone for the first chicane, and it's all changing up and down the order. Now ahead at the front, we can see Vincent is gradually being reeled in by the Irishman of Evbev, and Zenku is following suit, but everybody is getting that massive slipstream tow right now. and Vibes is going to go for an early move here, trying to get himself up into P3 as ZenQ looks to squeeze him a little bit, but not much. And you can see ZenQ actually has made a huge mistake there, and that has caused a bit of a backup, and ZenQ has gone off and spun out into the wall, coming out of the second Mulsanne chicane there. That's a disaster for ZenQ, but it's good news for Robert and Gomez as they now move up into the top 5, and they charge all the way down to the Mulsanne corner then. And you can see that Vincent is feeling a huge amount of pressure from Evbev, but Evbev is just tucking in. But in the battle for P4, Gomez is having to defend against Robert, who's trying to hang around the outside. And Peachy carries the momentum here, and Otterface goes deep, and Stanley is able to out-drag him in the acceleration zone, and Stanley is now up into P7. So who would have thought Otterface falling down, Stanley finding his momentum right now. But again, it could all change as we see Vincent is being chased by Evbev and Feel the Vibes, and they are getting closer and closer. And at the rear of your camera shot as they come into Indianapolis, you can see they're going to go too wide into Indianapolis. It's Robert, and Robert goes round the outside, and Peachy tries to follow as it looks as though Gomez initially shut the door but then reopened it, and Peachy has got a penalty for cutting track limits at Indianapolis, and it means that Gomez is up into P5 still, and Peachy makes a mistake there into Arnage, and he drops down and he finds himself falling further and further down, as now it's going to be side by side as Robert, hold on a second, there's been a huge change in the order here as we can see Phil the Vibes is now our race leader and he's battling against Vincent Simmer. What has happened here? Because we've got a huge gap opening up between our P1 and P2 guys, and in P3, and Robert finds himself in P3. So we're going to find out shortly, folks. But there's so much action happening right now, we can't jump away for a minute. Robert is up into P3, Evbev is down into P4, Gomez in P5, Stanley in P6, Pies in P7, and Otterface now in P8. And the driver who's lost out the most on this opening, that is ZenQ, he's all the way down the back. So as they come up towards the 4 chicanes then, to complete lap number 1, your order will be as they move on to the second lap. Feel the Vibes is running away at the moment alongside Vincent Simmer in second place. Then you've got a second back to Robert in third, Evbev in fourth, Gomez in fifth, Stanley in sixth, Pies in seventh, Peachy in eighth. Otterface dropping down to 9th after picking up a penalty. Marky Mark's going to fend off ZenQ in P11, and our order has settled a little bit for now, but I think it's not going to be long before we start seeing some more conflict out in the circuit in the form of battles and overtakes as all of our drivers come through the Dunlop chicane as best as they can. But I'd like to know, and I'm sure you'd like to know, what happened to Evbev, who's going to try and go around the outside to the inside going into turn 5, and Gomez had to go wide there to give Evbev the space, and he's lost it. Gomez has dropped off there and gone wide, and Stanley's picked up a penalty. But Evbev has inherited 4th place through the mistake of Gomez there going through turn 5 and running wide out of 6 up into Tetrarouge at 7, and that means these guys will pull away because Stanley's had to take that penalty, and Pies will now find himself at the head of the slipstream train chasing after P5. Up front, we can see that Vincent has dropped very far down. Now there's been a change here, and I'm assuming that Vincent has had to burn a penalty because there's no major discrepancy in the gap, but Robert is all the way up into P2 and chasing after Vibes, and Evbev is chasing after these guys, of course. But all the cars in our top 5, all in contention. Well, anybody's in contention right now because everybody is sniffing a little bit of slipstream out of one another. So we do have the extended slipstream train. We haven't seen anyone completely fall off of it as they're all coming out towards the second Mulsanne chicane then. And we can see that Robert is the man on a mission right now to redeem himself for race number 1. He is going and pounding for it. And well, if Robert is going to do it, this is the race to do it. He'll need this result. He'll want this result so badly after what has been a fraught night so far. Stanley holding on to that P7, but he's got Peachy getting closer and closer, and then we have a sizable gap to the pole in the form of ZenQ, but I think ZenQ is closed up in the battle for P6 very gradually. As they come up then into the Mulsanne corner, you can see Robert is right up Feel the Vibes' backside and sniffing all the exhaust fumes in, wanting to get a rush up towards the Indianapolis corner here down the Gulf Straight. In the rear of your picture there, you saw Evbev went wide, and Gomez is now up into P4. Evbev just got it all sorts of wrong under braking into the corner, and now we're going to have a drag race where Evbev has to try and insert himself into the slipstream of Pies whilst maintaining a gap from Stan Lee. And hold on a second, I think we've got a move into Indianapolis by Robert. He's going to go for it, and he's gone around the outside before the braking zone, and Robert is now your race leader, ladies and gentlemen, and he's going to do everything in his power to break away. As we can see, Vincent Simmer picks up another half-second penalty, and that is going to be painful, and same for Pies. This is a disaster for both the Dutchman and the Brit because they're going to fall so far down as they're coming up towards the Porsche curves. And really, for Vincent, it's not going to be too punishing, but for Pies, this is going to reset all his progress and move him down into P7 and feel the pressure of P8 right up his neck. And as they're all coming out, so I see side by side coming up into the Porsche curves, then Robert having to defend against the Feel the Vibes, who he made go as wide as possible in order to cost himself momentum, because you can only go one through there unless you have a driver who's completely round your outside. But Feel the Vibes did not have that overlay, and as they all come through the Corvette curves, then you can see that Vibes just falling back a little bit right now, but I don't think this is over. We've still got one more lap, and anybody could win out of our top 4 or even top 5 right now, and then you've got that sizable gap down to Stanley in P6, as Pies needs to burn another half-second penalty, as does Peachy, and ZenQ's got a 1.5-second penalty. They can't stop picking up penalties. This isn't football, lads. This is motorsport. We don't want it to go to penalties. Meanwhile, Marky Marks is completely off. Now, what has happened for Marky Marks? That's a disaster for the British driver who was trying to close up, as he just simply got it wrong here, and he's gone wide. Oh, my goodness. And that is completely off. It's all sorts of wrong, and he's just spun it out through there. But up front, hold on a second. What's happened to Robert here? Robert has been overtaken off camera. We're going to find out, and he's... Well, it looks as though he had to burn a penalty coming on to the next lap. So Robert right now down P2, but not too far for Feel the Vibes, and Vincent Simmer chasing after him. Gomez a bit back, and then Evbev just falling out of the slipstream zone, really. He's only just about holding on to the rear of Gomez's slipstream region, and Stanley's up into P6 as Peachy in P7 is being attacked right now by ZenQ. But up front in this battle for the race lead, Robert is now ahead, but it's all slipstream all the way into the first of the Mulsanne chicanes, and they're constantly trading positions. Feel the Vibes now goes around the outside to the inside, coming out that first chicane, and Vincent is getting closer and closer, and you can see what Vincent is doing here. He's timing this. He doesn't want to fight until he knows he has a chance to get the move done and then make it miserable for either of these two. But Robert right now will want to have that lead going into the Mulsanne corner after this chicane. He's going to try and hold on to the race for 9 initially here, and he's probably not expecting Feel the Vibes to go for a move, and Vincent is getting closer and closer, but you can see how they're all speaking about this. They're not trying to get the move done immediately and then suddenly find a magical pull away, as Vibes is now coming back, and Robert, I suspect, will hold as much as possible over to the right, but you can see that Vibes is trying to poke his nose in there. And now Robert is definitely going to go defensive as they're drag racing, but Vibes has got too much of a run already, and in fact Robert has dropped 2 places as Vincent's going to go for the lunge into the Mulsanne corner, and he's got it done, and Gomez goes deep and he falls away from this fight, and this puts him right out in front of Emma, who makes an emergency move there to dodge the spinning Portuguese. So the Portuguese drops all the way down, and it's going to be a three-way fight to the finish then for Vincent Simmer, Feel the Vibes, and Robert at the rear of your picture. And then you've got Evbev who's trying to creep up into this mix, but they're all coming up to Indianapolis, and it's 3 wide, and Vincent Simmer's going to be trying to hold on to the position. He just about holds on as he goes round the outside of Feel the Vibes, and is now our race leader as they cut towards Arnage. And you can think there's not many more overtaking opportunities to go. They've only really got one more drag strip as Vincent goes wide, then hold on a second, 2 of our drivers got it wrong, and Feel the Vibes has spun out. Feel the Vibes has got it wrong, and now there's only 2 left standing in the battle for the race win, as it's between Robert and Vincent Simmer, and behind them you can see Evbev is not close enough. Feel the Vibes has dropped to P4 with Stan Lee of all people now catching up, and he's going to be up into P4. Can he hold on? But Robert meanwhile is all over Vincent Simmer. He's literally sniffing the rear of that Porsche 962. Those fumes must be intoxicating, but he wants this win. Will he be able to get it? Only 2 more chicanes to go. It's going to be down to the line as Robert is trying to close up, but you can see Vincent is just doing enough. Robert's going to have to send it if he's going to get it, and I don't think it's going to happen. And coming into the final chicane then, unless Vincent's cut it too much, it is going to be Vincent Simmer who's won, with Robert coming second, and then behind them it will be Evbev coming home third on the podium. And it's Feel the Vibes in P4, who's got back past Stanley in P5, and then at the rear of your picture coming through right now, it's not going to be ZenQ, it's going to be Gomez who comes across in P6. So ZenQ has come home in P7, Peachy in P8, Otterface in P9, Pies in P10, and well, the only other driver would be Marky Marks, but Marky Marks had to retire after that collision into the wall coming out of the Chevrolet curves on lap 2. So your race winner again, ladies and gentlemen, Vincent Simmer. Goodness me. Well, after 2 races then, well, it's been mad, it's been frantic, but here are your standings, subject to the stewards, of course. It is Vincent Simmer winning race number 2, only 3 tenths ahead of Robert, but it was so close. And Robert, having made that recovery drive from P7 to P2, I think he'll have felt that he could have got the one done in this one, but still, to come home in P2, he'll be happy with that one to an extent, because he'll know he won't have thrown this result away, and it will all come down to the finale then. The question will be, can Vincent make it 3 in a row tonight? Evbev coming home in probably an unexpected P3 in the end after the mistake made by Gomez at the Mulsanne corner on lap number 3. Feel the vibes, won't be happy with the fact he got it all sorts of wrong coming out of Arnage, which cost him his ability to stay in that fight for the race win. But still, I think he'll be happy with that P4 despite that mistake. And Stanley with the surprise P5, ladies and gentlemen, bringing that Mazda 787B. And that is one of Stanley's best results of this season. Wow. Incredible. And the driver who had to retire was Marky Marks, and it was for that incident coming out of the Chevrolet curves there where he got it all wrong and went into the wall. But hopefully he'll be back for the final race of tonight. Now the question will be, ladies and gentlemen, given the results that Pies has had, and Evbev has had, well, I believe he's had better results, we could be seeing, if this continues and Pies does not have a fantastic final result, we could be seeing a change for the championship win here. Because Robert will be picking up some sizable points already. Evbev will have had the most consistent points out of the 3 of them. But I think at the moment, I don't unfortunately have a calculator to hand, Evbev, who needs to make up what is 12.5 points on Pies over the course of tonight's 3 races, well, he definitely has done very well compared to Pies in this race. And I think they're about matched in the previous race. So I think it's game on for who comes home with that championship win. So yeah, for those wondering, at the moment, it is a case that we have a huge contest on, not only for our top 5, not only for the podium, but also those championship standings. We're just going to take a quick sip of the water if you don't mind. We need it. I think the driver will have his head in his hands the most out of all of them right now will be Feel the Vibes, because he will have known he had a guaranteed podium as a minimum, and to lose it all with only one sector really to go. But still, he's going to be starting towards the front in this final race, so you never know what could happen. Oh dear. And he's just confirmed to us, in fact, from the paddock that yeah, he has got his head in his hands right now, but I'm sure he'll pick himself up and give it one more shot, because we know the Brit has a huge amount of pace here, and who knows, perhaps he could surprise us with a race win in the finale. Now we're on to the finale. That means we now have 6 laps, we have the endurance race, and we have that all important mandatory pit stop. And I think a lot of our drivers will use the intelligence provided to them from the race last night to know that changing the tyres is going to be a gamble. In that, if you go for that tyre change, as you can see Marky Marks and PG Erler deciding to get a little bit too intimate there with one of the cars. It's a bit of Mazda on Porsche action. But, well, that's a bit inappropriate for some of our viewers out there. My apologies. But anything could happen. And with the fact that the pit stop, if you take those tyres on, cost you so much time, and then you're reliant on the drivers ahead of you battling to bring you back into that contention, well, it's going to be about how well everybody can hook it up on the worn tyres. Still plenty of time to go, still plenty of pace out on track for everybody. And remember, we're going to see some really fast runs down the Mulsanne Straights and also the Gulf Straight, with what the fact the cars are going to have a lot less fuel come laps 5 and 6. And you can imagine in the tow, we could be seeing cars hitting about 220, 225 if they've got a double or a triple tow. And of course, it is subject to the gearing that our drivers have chosen as well, what of tuning being available, and we can definitely tell that some of our drivers, such as Vincent Simmer, have gone for a gearing which enables them to extract a huge amount of top speed down the straight, particularly if they've got slipstream, and that's why Vincent Simmer's so strong. As we're about to get then the finale underway, race number 3, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. It all comes down to this. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, it is race number 3, and on the right of your screen, it's Vincent Simmer once again, but this time joining him alongside is Robert from Germany. Behind them, the Irishman of EVBEV and Feel the Vibes. And even further back, watch out for ZenQ, who will be looking to rise up from P7, where he currently sits. And it's lights out and away they go, and you can see that Vincent has got it all sorts of wrong there in terms of launch, and that has given Robert the position. But how will all of our drivers do? Because they're going to have to react to the fact that Vincent has had a terrible start, and you can see Robert has had a good run, but Feel the Vibes immediately going for the move here, and there's a bit of a concertina as EVBEV seemed to get pushed along, and he's pushed both Robert and also Feel the Vibes wide, and Robert had to take to the escape road there, but he will pick up a time penalty most likely for that escape road, and Stanley finds himself up in P2 of all drivers right now. Peachy up into P3, EVBEV in P4, and ZenQ up into P5. And the one who's lost out the most for all this is Vincent Simmer, all the way down to P7. And as we look around, we can see we've only got 10 runners. So Marky Marks was not able to get their car restored as they come down to the Mole's End straight for the first time of asking. And you can see that drivers taking penalties left, right, and centre. Pies, for example, Stanley dropping back as well. But this is giving Robert, the German, a huge opportunity here to start squeaking away. As we can see, Feel the Vibes and EVBEV battling side by side, and they're going to be about 4 wide coming down to this first chicane then, and Stanley's going for the mother of all sins as everybody goes charging, and there's a Brit into the wall right at the back of your picture, and that was Otterface, and that was absolutely crazy. And behind them now, you've got Gomez, who's having a drag race with EVBEV as they're all coming down onto the second part of the straight, and they're all settling in. I think they're going to be told, I think they're getting all called in their ears right now, keep it calm, lads, and keep it professional, because this is a little bit scrappy right now. I think some of those worn legs and those tied arms are kicking in, as Gomez immediately going defensive on EVBEV, and I think he's worried that EVBEV is going to have a huge pace advantage. And you can see that Stanley has once again gone for a move, and alongside his fellow countryman, he's got the move done for P7 against Vincent Simmer. And behind all them, we can see Otterface will have to catch up. But right now, whilst Robert did have that 1 second advantage over Feel the Vibes, look how it's closed up already because of the runs down the straights. And Feel the Vibes here being attacked by ZenQ. ZenQ going for a bit of a move there, and it didn't quite work out. But you can imagine, hold on a second, we've seen somebody into the wall. Is that Stanley into the wall, going out in the Molesand corner? It is indeed. And Otterface as well getting it wrong, but just collecting it and not making love with the barrier, unlike Stanley. But they're both going to get it back under control. And what has been a really odd start for a number of our drivers, the driver who's really pulled away a bit most is ZenQ. He finds himself in P3, having started P7, and it's worked out magically for him. And EVBEV right now sitting in P4, well, he's got to keep that position and try and get up into that top 3 if he wants to usurp Pies in terms of the championship win, as he is forming a little bit of a train behind him at the moment. He's got past Gomez after Gomez had that very bad run out the Molesand corner, and you can immediately see that Gomez is going for the drag race against EVBEV, and he's going to pull back in. He hasn't got that speed, he hasn't got that overrun. And everybody is now settling into an order. As we can see in the rear of your camera shot there, we have got Peachy Erler battling with Vincent Simmer, and Vincent holding on at the moment, defending against Peachy. But as they're coming through the Porsche curves and onto the Corvette curves now, Robert's still in that commanding position ahead of ZenQ and Feel the Vibes. And as they all come through, we can see that EVBEV, hold on a second, Pies has gone very wide there, but he's regained it. And I think Pies has lost a lot of momentum and is now exposed to the dirty tyres. You can see the car unstable on exit because of the dirt on those rear tyres in particular, but he's rejoined safely in P6. Now, will Pies go for an immediate duck into the pits? No, as Vincent Simmer backs out of it. But after one lap, then it is Robert who leads the field, followed by Feel the Vibes, then ZenQ. Then it's going to be EVBEV ahead of Gomez, and then Pies behind, who's going to have to burn the penalty for cutting the forward chicanes. Then it will be Peachy who's jumped ahead of him, and as Vincent Simmer's also got ahead of him, and then behind Pies in P8 it'll be Dr. Otterface who's burned the penalty, and then Stanley 10 seconds back. Now, up front, we can see that Robert is still feeding pressure, but note what Robert is doing here and what Vibes and also ZQ are doing. They are all getting in a line and they're not fighting one another because they've got that gap to EVBEV behind where it's 2.7 seconds at the moment. And remember, the slipstream zone is 2.25 seconds. So if they can keep away from EVBEV, that means EVBEV will be constantly in a fight with Gomez, and those three can pull away and essentially run away with the race strategy here and run away with the fight. For P1, it will become a three-way fight and not a five-way fight, which includes both EVBEV and Gomez, who are looking to trade places here as they come up into the first of the moles and chicanes. And you can see that Gomez has got the run, and Feel the Vibes as well has tucked in front of Robert here as they come under him. Again, these are not huge position changes. I think our drivers are starting to settle down into that mentality of, look, we've got to work together in order to concede the fact that we may not be able to get the race-winning result right now. We can fight for it later, but if we work together, we will move up the field together and we'll get closer to that win. And you can see Pies, Peachy and Vincent forming into a little trio train as well. It's all about forming into these trains. And Dr. Otterface and Stan Lee right now, P9 and P10 respectively, as Stan gets it wrong under braking there to the first of the chicanes. They are the drivers who are really not going to benefit from all this because they're so far back. And really, in their shoes, if I was in their shoes, I'd go for a pit stop now, get the pit stop done, and then just try and hammer it and see if I can get back ahead through strategy, particularly if a driver or two decides to go for tyres, and I don't go for tyres. That's the only way I'm getting back into this race unless people make mistakes. And you can see at the rear of your camera shot, we've got Vincent and Pies battling here for P7 right now, Peachy and P6, so Peachy at the head of this little train, and just happily sauntering away as they come into braking for the Mulsanne corner for the second time of asking, and there's no change here. Everybody forming into a little conga line. Well, I say that, and then Peachy goes wide and gets it wrong, but rejoins, and Peachy's got it even more wrong. All sorts of wrong. First running off, then spinning it out, and that drops him into contention for a battle for P8 with Dr. Otterface. And you know what Otterface will be thinking right now? Oh, thank you, I've got a slipstream partner. This is perfect. Let's work together and get back up the field. But still, up front, we can see that Robert has now got ahead going into Indianapolis. But again, it's not a huge place change, as we mentioned previously, so don't get too excited right now. There's still plenty of racing to go, and I think they're just trading places and trying to keep composure here, simply because if they do any big fighting now on lap number 2, it's going to come back to haunt them on the later laps when everybody starts to get closer and closer. And you can see, because these guys have kept the fight to a minimum, that gap between them and Gomez, who's been fighting with EVBEV, has now opened up to 3.8 seconds. And this is exactly what we're talking about in terms of that need to work with your fellow opponent. Remember the phrase, keep your friends close, but your enemies even closer. Well, in this case, these three enemies, all enemies of one another, are keeping one another incredibly close. And ZQ is now running all over the back of Feel the Vibes, and Feel the Vibes has gone wide there, and I think he's had to concede to ZQ. Now, did he pick up a penalty for running wide? No, he did not, because he was able to get it under control, because Feel the Vibes decided to lift off the throttle, coming out of the final part of the Chevrolet curbs. Smart driving by the British driver as Robert is into the pits. Now, this is big in the battle for the win, because Robert, depends on whether he goes for a tyre change or not, may find himself behind Gomez and EVBEV, or he'll find himself coming up alongside, as Vincent also comes into the pits here. So where is Robert going to come out? Well, I think Robert has gone for a tyre change. Yes, Robert has gone for a tyre change, so he's going to go all in terms of going to have the grippiest possible tyres for the final 4 laps. Vincent Simmer is also in the pits right now, and we can see everybody chucking it into the pits from the rear, minus Pies, I think. And pardon me. And we can see Vincent has come out. Now, did Vincent take tyres? Yep, he's taken the tyres on as well. Has Otterface gone for tyres? Yep, he's going for tyres, as is Peachy. So these guys are going to come out together. And then Stanley's just coming into the pits right now, and we'll find out in due course whether he's gone for a new set of tyres. As we can see that ZQ and Feel the Vibes are spaced out a little bit. I think that's because Vibes has picked up some sort of penalty. But nonetheless, as we look back then, we can see that Gomez is not in the region to capitalise right now. Whilst he's got a gap on EVBEV, that will close up. But Robert right now needs to nail this lap in particular, because the gap between himself and EVBEV is 4.1 seconds. If he can close that gap up sizably by the end of this lap and get it to within 2.25 seconds, then he will start to build slipstream, and that will give him the opportunity to close up. Because look at that gap right now, that red delta on the left hand side of your screen, it's 9.1 seconds, and that will open up on these straights compared to the race leader. That is the gap to the race leader. But as soon as they start to come down to all the handling zones, that's where Robert needs to close it up, because he wants to get as close as possible to the guys around him. As we see ahead, EVBEV pulling away initially because of that slipstream. And really, it's all going to be for Robert. It's all in Robert's hands right now, as ZenQ and Feel the Vibes have traded places once again. But note how they're not fighting each other too much. Although ZenQ there seems to be wanting to poke out to try and go for the move into the Mulsanne corner. And I think from ZenQ's perspective, he wants to have that positional advantage going up into Mulsanne. But you could see that he almost got it wrong on entry. And I wonder if he's cut the curb too much, because you know that Feel the Vibes wasn't able to take the full racing line there. And that little bit of fighting right there is exactly what costs time. And I think this is going to work out for Robert, because they will have cost each other about 2-3 tenths in that one corner alone. And as we wind back, we can see that Gomez and FBev are still working together, and that gap has come down from what was about 9.3 seconds back down to 8.8 seconds. And that's precisely what we're talking about here, as Pies finds himself in a very lonely sixth at the moment, having not pitted. Vincent Simmer in a similar situation. Otterface and Peachy together. Otterface ahead of Peachy. I think Peachy may have made a mistake or picked up a penalty. And then Stanley running a quiet 10th place on a fresh set of tyres, just to confirm that he did go for the tyre change. Now, with everything spacing out, we're just going to hop back and see what happened on that race start. And we can see here that as they all come into that first corner, I think there was, FBev seemed to get knocked forward effectively, and that's what caused everybody to concertina up. And then we saw that one driver went absolutely charging wide there, and I think that might have been Marky Marks, who just went flying off. And you can see how ZenQ gained so much. He just had himself positioned as FBev went deep there, and that's how it all played out on the opening couple quarters of lap 1. And coming back to ZenQ right now, you can see that as they're going through the Chevrolet Coast, they're fighting once again. And I think Vibes here will be thinking to himself, right, ZenQ, if you're not going to stop fighting, I'm going to pit. Or ZenQ might be doing the same. And you can see both of them into the pits. They both want to be together in terms of coming into the pits. And behind them as well, Gomez into the pits and FBev into the pits as well. But FBev has got it wrong in pit, and he's lost a huge amount of time. And he's fortunately made it into the pits. Now, where will Robert come out in relation to him? It's going to be close. Now, remember, anybody who pits now, if they don't take tyres, could come out alongside Robert. And as he's coming down then to turn number 1, keep it on the left hand side of your screen, he's going to come out in front of ZenQ and also FBev and also Feel the Vibes. But has he done enough to break the slipstream zone? It's going to be very close here. The two drivers behind him will have to now, I think Robert's done it. He just needs to run away. Although he's 1.9 seconds, he hasn't done enough. But the guys behind him will have one tyres, and ZenQ has picked up a penalty. Now this could be critical for Robert, and ZenQ's already burning a bit of the penalty under braking there into that corner. And what that will mean is he'll hold up Feel the Vibes a little bit. Now this is going to be so dangerously close, as Gomez has jumped up to P4 as a result of that pit stop. Pies in P5. FBev has dropped all the way down to P6 after changing tyres, but he's come out in the slipstream of Pies, and this is important because FBev right now has timed this perfectly. He has set himself up so he will use Pies as his marker for the slipstream. I don't think Pies has pitted. Alternatively, if he has, then, if he has pitted, then what that will mean is that he has effectively put himself in a position now where he finds that he is at the whim of FBev's pace. But as they're coming through then on to this full flat, and for the second part of the Mulsanne straight, you can see that Robert has broken the slipstream, ladies and gentlemen. He is now 2.6 seconds ahead. So all he has to do is now every single lap. He cannot afford a single mistake. And if he does that, and he lets Feel the Vibes and ZenQ play the game of cat and mouse with one another, then what Robert can imagine is, so long as he doesn't overdo it, he will simply drift off into the distance. But Vibes right now and ZenQ, I reckon, will be aware of this. Particularly Vibes. We have seen how he is tried to play things so carefully with ZenQ, and ZenQ has respected it to an extent, but not being as perhaps tactful as Vibes. Although that's not to discredit to ZenQ, he'll want every position. But meanwhile, Gomez right now chasing after them, and Pies as well. This is important for Pies because he needs to finish ahead of FBev to come ahead of FBev in the final championship standings, because Pies is currently your championship leader. And behind them, well, you've got a long gap back to Vincent Simmer. Peachy and Dr. Otterface battling for that P8, and Peachy is now ahead, and Stanley a further 19 seconds back. It's not been Stanley's day. But you can see that Robert has not had the best Mulsanne corner. In fact, he's just dropped that gap a bit too much, and the guys behind are getting closer and closer now, and they'll be feeling it. They'll be feeling that distant toe out of Robert's car. But then again, perhaps what Robert's thinking right now is he just cannot afford to run the car as hard as perhaps he'd like to, as Robert's got it wrong. Robert has got it horrifically wrong at our nudge there and gone completely off, and I think that's going to be compounded with a huge penalty. A mistake from the German is at the rear of your camera shot. You see Pies gets it wrong as well, and that means whilst he's got ahead of Gomez right now, I think Gomez was overtaken by Pies into Arnage. Pies is going to have a lot of pressure on him from both FBev and Gomez as they're coming up into the Porsche curves then. And Vincent Simmer behind. Remember, Vincent, he was quite a way back, about 5 seconds back, but he is closing up on this little battle for P4. And whilst Pies is in command right now, I think a lot of tiredness is kicking in. As Gomez got it wrong there, coming out of the push, because you saw him hit the wall. And that means he's all out of sorts coming into the Corvette curves. And he's holding up FBev heavily here. And FBev will not want this. He'll want to get past Gomez, because Pies is just gradually trundling away right now. And you can see the pressure is getting to Robert so much as he's made another mistake and he finds himself dropping back into P3. This is a disaster. Well, not P3, so P2 right now, but in the fight. And well, Feel the Vibes is going to immediately start to work on it. There's 2 laps to go as Pies finally pits. That's our confirmation that Pies has not pitted yet. So Pies will come all the way behind FBev here. And I think FBev, if he's able to get even further up the field, will secure the championship win here. But we'll find out afterwards as Robert is defending against Feel the Vibes right now. And really, can he afford to be defending? Because he will need that race win. He'll want it so much, and he'll just need to chase after ZQ, and perhaps he might be wanting to let Feel the Vibes through right now and calm himself down a little bit, because he had a huge advantage. He's blown it for the time being, but it's not over for Robert. You know he'll come back strong here with 1 3/4 laps to go. Gomez now up into that P4 with Pies pitting, the FBev up into P5, and this is the opportunity, of course, for FBev. He will want to get that P4 and put Pies to bed in terms of his championship aspirations in winning the championship for season 35 in the driver's standings. Vincent, however, will be the key to this. Pies needs to close up to Vincent as quickly as possible. Now, did Pies go for a new set of tyres? He did, so he can absolutely abuse these tyres now to the end with only 2 laps to go, and that's what Pies is going to be doing, and he'll try to close up. Now up front, you can see that Robert has got himself back ahead of Feel the Vibes and ZenQ, but notice how they are again going through this sequence of trading places, and this is not where Robert wanted himself to be, so he's now got to play this as if it's NASCAR effectively, ladies and gentlemen, or an oval race, where he needs to be smart about when he uses the slipstream, when he uses that slingshot to get himself in the prime position, and it's not on this lap that he can afford to be playing about. He needs to calm it down and analyse what his opponents are doing, understand where they're strong, understand where they're weak, and you can see in the rear of your camera shot, Gomez picked up a penalty at the second Mulsanne chicane, and that means FBev from Ireland is now up into P4, and this is critical, and Pies will see that, and he will need to respond immediately and get as close as possible to FBev in the standings in terms of this final race, because he will want to finish as close as possible to stay ahead in the championship. Our prediction appears to be that he needs to become 5th in the championship in order to win, 5th in this race to win the championship, so it is going to be so close, and Pies is going to have to be a man on a mission as Gomez goes back ahead of FBev, and he'll be hoping that Gomez continues to fight with FBev. As you can see, at Indianapolis right now, our top 3 staying together, and meanwhile Gomez and FBev go side by side, and FBev backs out of it under braking into Indianapolis, because I think he's got one eye on the championship and knows he can't afford to have a rash moment against Gomez here, because Gomez isn't fighting for the championship win. FBev is, however, and Vincent Simmer behind is closing up. That gap is close to 3 seconds now, and Pies, I don't think Pies has had a good run, because that gap between himself and Vincent has opened up. And I think Pies is falling off here, and that is not good for the British driver here, because it's really putting everything in the hands of something happening between Gomez and FBev as they come towards the final lap then, and Otterface has got himself a nice amount of comfort space between Peachy, so I don't think there's going to be a fight there. But meanwhile, up front, a change of position once again. We can see coming out of the Corvette curves then up towards the Ford chicane, it is ZenQ now leading our trio of guys hunting for that race win, and ZenQ here in that commanding position initially, but remember, we've got one more lap to go, and so long as nobody picks up a major penalty or major mistake here, all 3 of these guys will close up on the Mulsanne straight, and we go once again. So one more lap to go, ladies and gentlemen, as FBev also has to try and find a way past Gomez here. It's going to be one more lap, and it's all going to come down to that final lap. You can see in the rear of your camera shot, you've got Vincent, and Pies is not closing up as he's picked up a penalty. So Pies right now dropping away, and really we need to focus on what's happening between our race leaders. As you can see, Vibes has already gone for the move up into the Dunlop chicane to get ahead of Robert, and that has increased the gap between these two and ZenQ to about 1.2 seconds, 1.4 seconds in fact. And in turn, what it means now is for ZenQ, he has to just simply not put a foot wrong, because he knows the guys behind him will make the gain on him down the straight. But of course, if Robert and Feel the Vibes continue to fight heavily, as you can see, that gap has opened up to an astounding 1.8 seconds. And really, from Robert's perspective right now, he needs to think about this, and so does Feel the Vibes. They both will want to get closer to ZenQ. They'll want to now under braking. Gomez, meanwhile, in P4, FBev behind him. These two will be sizing one another, and FF is getting closer and closer. I think the Irishman will be looking to make a move in due course, but nothing else is closing up, folks, and we can see that that gap between ZenQ and Feel the Vibes is closing, but look how big the gap ZenQ's been able to build is. Now, this won't guarantee him the win if he doesn't make a mistake, but what it means is it takes away any pressure for him. It takes away any pressure for him as he comes into the second multi-zone chicane. And already there's only a couple more overtaking zones remaining. Now it looks as though Vibes has nailed his second multi-zone chicane, whereas Robert hasn't quite nailed it, as Gomez goes wide initially there. Now will that be a time penalty for Gomez? We're going to find out very shortly. It doesn't look as though he's accrued a penalty there, but up front, you can see Feel the Vibes now closed up to ZenQ, and from Robert's perspective, he needs to let these guys fight just a little bit longer. As you can see, Vibes get, and Robert spun out! Robert has gone into the wall at the Mulzone corner, and it's in tatters for Robert. The German has got it wrong, and what was a podium guaranteed has now dropped to a battle for P6. Oh no, for Robert, it's a disaster, but up front, we have to move on, unfortunately, and it's Feel the Vibes who's now finding himself ahead of ZenQ as they go into Indianapolis. ZenQ is going to try and scramble to get back past them. Feel the Vibes has timed this. The British driver has been waiting to make the move now into Arnage. Will ZenQ come back here for a potential move? And I think Feel the Vibes has either got it wrong or he's been knocked wide, and I think there was contact there because ZenQ lifted out when he could have gained. So credit to ZenQ for lifting out there, and behind them, Gomez is just holding off against Ezbev right now, but Pies is back in P7 and finds that he's not close enough to catch up to Robert, who's gone off at Arnage. But up front, it's going to be Feel the Vibes who is leading at the moment. Gomez up to P3, of course, to try to hold on, but we're focusing on our race leaders, and ZenQ is all over the back of Vibes like a bad rash. You won't want this rash on your back, ladies and gentlemen. The Polish one's going around the outside into the Corvette curves. Now, will he hold it together? He's held it together. You never see that. The pole went round the outside, and I think he's done it. I think ZenQ's done it as they come down to the forward chicanes. Only 2 more corners to go. Can he bring it home and bring home a win in round number 3 as he goes wide? And that means Feel the Vibes picks up the win. The Brit wins, and ZenQ is going to come home in what is a very frustrating P2, and Gomez holds on for P3, Evbev in P4, Vincent is coming home in P5, and Robert, oh, poor Robert, coming home in P6, just stopping Pies from picking up P6. Pies in P7. And Dr. Otterface coming through the final 2 chicanes then to complete his sequence. Coming through then, 1 chicane remaining after this one. The British driver having had a bit of a difficult race, but bringing it home nonetheless. P8 for Dr. Otterface. Now PG coming up to the chicanes as well, currently in P9, no pressure on the finish, but it wasn't his race to be today. I think he's cut the chicane a bit too much there, so he may be accruing a little bit of a time penalty, but he won't be concerned. Yeah, 1.5 second penalty, but he'll just put that one down to Steward's inquiry. And then, last but not least, coming through the final sequence of corners, after what started off as a promising race, another rather difficult one for the Dutchman, Stan Lee. Oh, you got to feel for him. He's not had it good this season, but still, he stayed in the races all the way to the end, and that's credit to him. That's the competitive spirit going through. Stanley completes our running order, with Marky Marks retiring at the start of lap number 1. So there's your final standings, ladies and gentlemen, and the race winner, Feel the Vibes from the United Kingdom. What an ending, ladies and gentlemen. You can't predict it. I thought ZenQ had it all done with probably the best overtake we have seen all season from all divisions. And then to lose it at the final corner, on the final stretch, that is crippling. That really is. I know you've got to feel for him to be in that situation where that happens. You don't want to be there. But at the same time, one driver's loss is another driver's gain. And Feel the Vibes will be very happy with that one. And the fastest lap went to ZenQ there with a 3:21.7 on lap number 2. Well, what a crazy end to the night. What a crazy finale. Gomez picking up the 3rd step of the podium. FF in P4 and Vincent Stibbo rounding off our top 5 there. Oh. And as we look over towards our statistics here, one thing that's worth pointing out is that that is an inaugural win in the season for Feel the Vibes. He never picked up a win until today, and it's also his debut season within the GTSRL, so he'll feel very proud of that, to pick up his first win in what was a very closely packed and contended division. I'm sure many of you have got your calculators out at this point to see who has won in terms of the, who has won in terms of the Drivers' Championship. Now, unfortunately, we don't have all of the results available at the moment, but I'm sure that our organisers will be quickly scrambling to get the final results out. I get the feeling that FF may have missed out on the win by perhaps half a point, if that, but we'll wait to have it confirmed, of course, because there's still the points to be accrued, and then potentially any steward's decisions be the contact over the course of the 3 races. But a great end, and congratulations to all of our drivers for what has been a fantastic season of races, and it's time for us to wrap up with some King of the Karts. And I'm going to take a very quick sip of water because I have got no voice left. So the one I feel most for, to be honest, over the course of that final race is Robert. He didn't put a single foot wrong all the way up to when he had the lead and the gap, and then it all just started to go wrong. And that's a real shame for Robert again. Now, he has proven his credentials in terms of how much pace he's got, and he's someone who we can definitely expect more from in the future as we go into 2021. And from all of our drivers, really. And when the new blood of, say, Feel the Vibes, showing just how strong they are as well, it's going to be a cracker going into next year. But before we can get to next year, we need to do some King of the Karts. Here we go then, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try not to finish last this time. So we start on, well, start P2. Hello there, Stan. We need to get after Jerry. We can't let Jerry get away. Come on, Vibes. We need a little bit of a run here. We need a bit of grub for you, buddy. As everybody's cutting the corner at Tetra Rouge. The only one time you are allowed to cut that corner. Oh, bit of a bump and grind there. We're going to stay in 5th gear. As you can see, the intensity of this drag race and the go-karts down the Mole's Edge Straight Part 1. The cart's just got no pace. Oh, we get a big bump there. Oh, steady on. We almost launched our kart into outer space. I'm in the wrong race view. Sorry about this. I just realised which view I'm in. And Pies and Company are a long way back, actually, so it's a three-way fight for the win here. That was a much better chicane compared to the first one. We'll just forget we ever did the first one. It's 3 wide on go-karts coming down the Molesend straight towards the Molesend corner. A little bit of contact. Right, and we go to the braking zone then. Oh, and we've lost another driver, so it's between 2 of us now for the win. Alrighty, feel the vibes. Just stay together. Let's be smart about this one. Let's pull away from Jerry initially. He is gaining on us, but let's just stay together. Oh, goodness me. I think Jerry's coming through like a flipping rocket ship right now. He's going to come through on the radar very shortly. So up into Indianapolis we come then. Jerry is going to be right in the rear of the shop. Oh, a bit of door up in there, if there were doors on these cars, of course, which there's not. And Feel the Vibes has got it all sorts of wrong, so we are now in a 2-way fight for the finale, but it's with the Dutchman. Yeah, a bit of leg rubbing instead, you could say, instead of door rubbing. Well, that does sound a little bit inappropriate. And Pies is actually gaining massively on the pair of us right now. Trying to get them. Oh, here comes Feel the Vibes. Oh. And here comes Pies as well. Remember, we can't cut the chicanes here because of the fact we'll get a reset. Oh, I've been knocked. Yeah, I got knocked. I'll take a P3 though, I'll take a P3. I got knocked there as coming in under braking. Well, that was good fun. Oh, dearie me. Oh, that's a terrible knock-knock joke. I love it. Well, that concludes tonight's festivities, ladies and gentlemen. Now, 8.3 miles put on our car. But of course, you've got plenty more to look forward to tomorrow, in the fact that we come back with EU Division 3 at the same time, at 7:30 in the evening. That's Greenwich Mean Time or UTC, so Universal Time. But thank you very much for tuning in tonight. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, be sure, if you're not already subscribed to the Twitch channel, to subscribe. And until tomorrow, I bid you all a lovely evening. Stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. See you tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, for the finale of EU Division 3.